I'd like to call this meeting of the West South Milwaukee School Board to order. Ms. Lee, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes.
And then after the pledge this evening, we're going to take a moment of silence for the shooting that occurred in Nashville. And so if everyone could please remain standing after the pledge.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone. Suzette, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Deal. Here. Mr. Sickich.
Present.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Mrs. Carr. Here. Mr. Becker is joining on Zoom. You see him?
I did see him on Zoom. Joe, I see thumbs up and waving and smiling. Okay, so he is present.
Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Present.
Mrs. Lee. Here. Mrs. Kaiser. Here. And President Lee.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Our Dr. Lexman is joining via Zoom as well. Is there any modifications to the agenda this evening?
No changes this evening.
Oh, he's shaking his head there. All right, and so we'll move right into the superintendent's report.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, thank you and good evening, everyone. We will start with 6.1, the legislative update. So a couple of things here. What we've put together is just a little bit of awareness around April referenda or referendums that are taking place. We don't have one, just for anybody listening, just for clarity's sake. But it is interesting with the April election cycle, and schools are trying to plan amid state budget uncertainties while still striving to be fiscally responsible with their funds. So in 3 of the last 4 budgets, revenue limits for districts have been frozen. School boards are looking at maintenance needs, upcoming and upgrades, and weighing decisions on whether to wait or borrow the funds now. Schools are experiencing increased project costs due to inflation, an increase in supply needs, and interest rates. So schools may be choosing to go to referendum now to offset expanding inflation, economic pressures, and to provide some predictability in their budgeting. So there you can see that there are 82 school referendums scheduled for the April 4th ballot. 29 to issue debt, 10 to exceed the cap on a recurring basis, and 43 to exceed the cap on a non-recurring basis. And we'll be watching, again, as we always do, just to see the outcome of referendum and communities that choose to support those. And on 6.2, sorry, district recognitions. First of all, great work to the schools who did their showcases a week ago. So big shout out to West, Wilson, Pershing, Jefferson, Irving, Shared Journeys, Deeper Learning Virtual Academy. They all did a great job. At Central, the West Dallas robotics team finished 3rd in the Rich Township aerial drone competition held in Olympia Fields, Illinois on March 18th. The aerial drone competition is a day-long tournament style competition featuring head-to-head matches, skills demonstrations, and a technical interview. Their performance at the regional event earned them an invite to the Aerial Drone Competition Championship in Flint, Michigan on May 13th to the 14th. So the team is excited to continue their season and looks forward to your support. As they fundraise to attend the national event, we also have dollars in the superintendent's budget that supports any kind of team, athletic, academic, a robotics team when they start going into regional and state competitions. So they'll be continuing their season. And congratulations to Ms. Maria Takali, the coach Quentin Bannigan, Jonathan Perez, Caden Schaefer-Rose, Sioban Bartz, Brown Piper, and Spencer Larson. And from Lane, the entire Lane team has been exceptionally proactive in covering for unexpected absences and staffing changes. In particular, our office team, Consuelo Moreno and Lori Window, and youth advisors Anaya Miller and Sean Jenkins are stepping up as needed to meet the needs of our students. So many thanks to the entire Lane team. From Pershing School would like to recognize our Family Engagement Committee. The committee includes Nancy Niehaus, Michelle Pipel, Amanda Wood, Sarah Frenzy, and Darlene Moore. And thank you for organizing a Read Across America Fund for our students and families. From Sodexo, congratulations to fourth grader Hunter Armstrong from Walker Elementary for winning Sodexo's Future Chef competition. So this year's criteria was favorite fruit or vegetable side dish. Hunter's winning recipe was baked carrot chips. He competed against 5 other district finalists on March 15th. So our finalists were selected from over 85 recipes. Our junior chef's winning recipe will now move to regional judging that takes place in April. And then for Mary Pat Michaels in the music department, the district solo and ensemble music festival for this year was on February 25th. Many of us attended that. So students from area schools participated in a Wisconsin School Music Association sanctioned district solo and ensemble music festival hosted at West Allis Central High School. There were 12 sites, over 400 events, and 507 students participating in the festival. Students from Central, Nathan Hale Dotke, Frank Lloyd Wright, Lane, and West Milwaukee, as well as 6 neighboring guest schools were at the festival. You can see there, a total medal count was 443 gold, 146 silver, and 33 bronze, totaling 611 for our school district. And then you can see the breakdown. I'm not going to go through all of them from each school, but I do want to congratulate all of our musicians and thank our music department for the level of organizing that takes. And there were lots of parent volunteers there as well. So it's a powerful experience for students, and the quality was impressive. So I'm going to thank everybody for that work. And then in 6.3, really quickly, some just updates and information items. So in response to public comments during a regular meeting on March 13th, one member of the public made comments on a number of topics, none of which were new. So there's no new additional follow-up there. A little update on school consolidation. So we had our first round of teacher selection of open positions. And so that window was open for 2 weeks, and most teachers are now already assigned to their first or second choices. So there's just a handful of teachers that still need an assignment for the upcoming school year. And the phase 2 opens April 3rd. So next week, Monday, when we're back from break. That then closes on April 14th, and a notification a week later, April 21st. And we believe by then, all of the teachers that are impacted by the school consolidations will have assignments for next year. And then we go back to our kind of normal recruiting, hiring processes for teachers that want to consider other opportunities within our district. And that's an internal posting. And then there's a mechanism through which they can interview and be selected for jobs in other schools. And then depending on what the board approves this evening regarding the safety resolution, just so the board and community is aware, we're preparing communication again, because assuming the board approves this, there'll be quite a bit of new information, even though we pushed some things out last Friday. Just because it is so new, we'll do quite a bit of additional communication depending on the outcome of the deliberation and decisions this evening. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 7, public comments for this evening. Those who are interested in providing a public comment, there is an online form. If you're here in person and you have not signed up already, there is a device at the back of the room for which to do so. If you are attending via Zoom, there should be a link in the chat to be able to sign up for the online form. Everyone can give comments to the board for up to 3 minutes. You must start your comments with your name and your address. The board will not have any back and forth discussion with you. However, if there is a simple question or clarification that can be made following your comments, those may be made at the end of your comments. However, that does not reopen the public comment from that individual. If there is a longer response that is necessary, that will be provided to you by the next regular board meeting, either via the superintendent's report or responding personally via email or mail. So we'll go in the order in which people have signed up, starting with Ms. Christine Ghosh.
Hi, my name is Christine Gosh, and my address is W256 S10260 Sand Hill Ridge Road, and that's in McWanago. So good evening, everyone. I am the very proud principal of Irving Elementary and a proud district staff member since 1989. Don't do the math. Well, you can do the math. I've served the students and families in our community for my entire career. Tonight, you're going to be voting in regards to restructuring our post-employment benefits. And I just had a couple of very brief thoughts to share. Throughout my many years in our district, I've had an opportunity as a teacher and also as an administrator to gain employment in neighboring school districts. So leaving our school district would have meant probably an increase in my salary, as well as a lower retirement age than I'm currently being offered. However, I chose to stay with the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District. And I did this because I believe so very strongly in our mission and our vision. And I wanted to continue to be committed to the great things that we do each and every day for our students in our school district. As a principal, one of my goals is to support our talented staff members, and so that they too will retain their employment here in our district, even when the work gets hard and messy sometimes. It's no secret that our district at times has not been able to compete with surrounding district salary for new and experienced teachers. But my hope is that the OPEB plan will pass and will influence our talented district staff members to maintain active employment in our district, as the future savings will continue to improve employee compensation for all staff members. And for those of us who have dedicated our careers to this district and are within 5 years of retirement, I'm asking that you please honor our commitment and dedication to this community by approving the restructuring and providing us with quality post-employment benefits and the ability to retire earlier than 60, 62, or 65. Nobody wants to see me at 65 at Irving School. I would imagine, though, also just in concluding here, being a school board member is a little bit of a thankless job at times. And I just really want to truly thank you for what you do for our students and putting children first and doing what's right for kids. So thank you for your time and your dedication and your commitment.
Thank you very much. Kelly Taylor Schaus.
Hello, I am Kelly Taylor Schaus. I live over on 72nd Street in West Dallas. And I am here as a parent of a freshman at Central. I am concerned about the taking away of phones across the board. I got to talk to Mr. Lee a little bit about why, so far as fights being recorded and instigated and such like that. Now, my kids will tell you I would normally say, yay, take the phones away. I never thought that phones in school are very conducive to learning. Having said that, my kid has been diagnosed with ADD in the last year and a half. And because of our knowledge of that and therapy and such, we have found that music in their ears helps them focus on what's going on in front of them, as well as to be able to distinguish between what's happening in the classroom. And I am concerned about an across the board pulling of phones. I am concerned about, is what is happening in one school happening in the other school, and is it warranted to take phones away from everybody the whole time? I don't know the answers for that, but I wanted to make sure that you heard at least from one parent who's concerned about that, whose child really uses it as a tool. Granted, I do get the occasional text when I shouldn't be, but it's still a communication tool, at least for me and my family. And I know with my child's sphere of influence and the friends there, it really is a tool for differently abled kids who do not have the support of an IEP to be able to get that support from each other as well as from therapists or parents that are not in the building at the time. And so, again, while I would agree on one hand, to be able to address the concern immediately at hand, I'm really not quite sure that I agree with phones being pulled from everybody all the way across the board. So I guess take that with a grain of salt. It's one person's opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Perry?
Good evening, I'm Glenn Perry. My address
One
is
second, sorry, we just want to get the timer set up for you. Apologize.
We'll say 18 minutes, go there.
I don't want 18 minutes.
It's not working.
No, I don't know.
I can use my phone in the interim. That's what I used to do before we got the.
You can just tell me when to shut up.
All right. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, again, my name is Glenn Perry. My address is going to throw you. N7406 Sunset Circle Drive, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. But I actually teach at Nathan Hale here in town. And what I want to talk to you about just briefly is also about the change in the retirement. I've only been in West Dallas for 5 years now. I've been teaching for 20. I actually used to teach with Mr. Burns there. Seems like forever ago, but in my short time here, I've become the department chair and also work real close with the CTE coordinator. So I work with Central, I work with some of the middle schools, I work with the CTE department chair at Hale for all of CTE. And I've seen a lot of people come and go in 5 years. I want to say between Central and Hale, we've gone through at least 8 Woods teachers. We've gone through 5 autos teachers. And I couldn't even tell you how many business teachers and FCS teachers. And it's not always about the money at hand, but it's what's down the road and what can we look forward to. And I think this idea is great. It's not going to be something fantastic for me. I'm hoping like heck I can get out before I die. Maybe 5 to 7 more years. I have 2 kids starting college next year. I have 2 more still in high school. But I look at people that are coming into education now and people that are just starting here with only 4 or 5 years of experience, and we're going to be wanting to keep them here because this turnover rate it's hard on everybody. And I know it's expensive for the district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 1 more minute left. There we go. All right, good. All right. Steve Broadwell.
Steve Broadwell, 12965 West Ohio Court in New Berlin. I attended the forum last week during which students asked a lot of good questions. Several addressed the district's poor academic performance. As always, you blame COVID. Here's a spreadsheet I'm going to give you with DPI stats showing how poorly this district performed relative to 14 other area districts during COVID. We did worse than all 14 and a lot worse than some, including Milwaukee, because of how you handle COVID, not because of COVID. Some districts even improved. You ignored the pleas of parents to remove masks that don't work and stunt growth, close schools when some other districts didn't, and you even ignored Dr. Johnson's advice not to mask. You blame biased, and let's face it, you meant racist, standardized testing for our poor DPI scores. 4 years ago, DPI had this district rated based on that same testing as meets expectation, which was 17 points higher than today. Now we're rated as meets few expectations. And were those tests also biased 4 years ago when the district scored much better? Marty has blamed the high percentage of underprivileged kids in this district for poor DPI scores. MPS has a much higher percentage of underprivileged, yet they scored better than us. Brian said the district needs to remove distractions that take away from learning. Do you mean stuff like SEL, social emotional learning, that evidently is not working? Even with all your scapegoating, the comment that really took the cake for me was Kristen's when she said she would like to see an LGBTQ curriculum implemented. Such nonsense is merely an effort to normalize the transgender social contagion that legitimate experts agree is most
Mr.
often
Broadwell,
an
I want to warn you against hate
undiagnosed
speech against
psychological
those
problem.
community.
What?
I want to warn you about hate speech that's not allowed during
Why
public
is that
comment.
hate speech?
It's considered hate speech.
By who?
You called them a social contagion.
That's what it is.
It is hate speech. Mr. Broadwell will not
That's
be,
hate speech?
it will not be allowed during this public comment. You could, your opinions
Okay.
are fine, everyone places,
already
but you will
heard it,
not be
so
allowed
I'll
to do
move
it
on.
here.
You can't honestly believe that this is based on science. Beyond the insanity of this fad, this sort of biased indoctrination.
Mr. Broadwell,
further
you've been
dilute-
warned. Calling it a fad is as equally bad.
Is it?
Yes,
So says your endorser.
this is your warning. If you
G-safe.
continue this route, you'll be done.
Because you can't stand the truth. Did you listen to that podcast I sent you, that psychologist on that 2-hour podcast explaining that it's a contagion? Or do you just have, there's no other opinion?
Thank you, Mr. Broadwell.
Science.
Thank you,
keep
Mr.
talking
Broadwell.
about science. They're always.
Thank you, Mr. Broadwell.
And you want 3 more years? Tell you what, here's that spreadsheet that shows how crappy you guys did. Compared to all the other districts, all right?
Thank you. Moving on. Devin Ray. She here in person.
Devin Ray, 1027 South 110th Street. The resolution for the school safety should have been discussed in an open meeting. All of the items that are listed as changes impact all students and families. There is no legal parameter that justifies going into closed session for the changes that are being proposed here today. None. I contacted an attorney. There's none. Noah, you stated in a recent forum that you understand the need for transparency, yet you continue to make matter worse by never respecting parents' rights about those issues. I also want to bring your attention to the fact that your action plan failed to address the root cause. Do you even know how to plan an action plan? You completely missed it. Changing what words are put into a document does not matter when the issue is that the administration is not following it. You have the policy to state what is expected of the students. What you lack is the administrative procedure. I asked for the administrative procedure and I was told one doesn't exist. So you have the what is to be enforced, but you're completely missing the how it will be enforced. Therefore, you are still missing what everybody wants most, accountability. Dave Jesse's 3-strike plan addresses the accountability. His plan encompasses expectations and ramifications, not only for the students and the parents, but for the staff, admin, and the school board. That is what is needed. Stronger discipline written for students will not make a difference if the same people are able to sweep the same issues under the same rug, like they have done for years. The DPI saw these failures at the district to be on the level of the admin and the board. They documented in their investigation that the areas of failure, all areas of failure, already had policies that were written, but they weren't followed. The policies and the code of conduct were never the issue. The issue was the admins were not following the policy and the board was not holding the admins accountable. Marty and Noah then sent out a letter to the community. They said this was a one-time incident where they messed up. That's a complete lie. In the 2021-2022 school year alone, there were 2,163 reported incidents. 42 of those fell under the policy's criteria to be reported to the compliance officer. 42. Yet only one was reported. Only one, because after the district repeatedly failed to do it themselves, I did it. No parent should have to do that. There was dozens of people that should have been mandated reporters to report that to the compliance officer, and not one of them did it. So mine was the only one that was reported because a parent did it themselves. That leaves 41 other instances in just 1 year. that have fallen under the same people failing to follow the same policies. The policy is not the issue. The people not following the policy are the issue. If you pass this resolution as is, it does not create the needed accountability. Adopt administrative procedures and hold people accountable. Otherwise, you have nothing. Thank you.
No clapping. Part of decorum.
I forgot only teachers are allowed to clap.
Not during public comments, Mr. Broadwell.
Oh, they were clapping in one meeting, you know.
Okay. Amanda Hanson?
Amanda Hanson, 934 South 90th. Oftentimes, it's a good idea for great districts to review and revise their policies and procedures as society shifts and evolves. Sometimes bad districts use this practice to conceal their failures. In 2014, we left this district when our 4-year-old son was repeatedly called names a 4-year-old should never hear for wearing a headband. I won't sacrifice my 3 minutes giving context to that. Regardless, it was worn innocently by him. Your district did nothing to stop this. When my brother and I went to the enrollment center to apply for a transfer, we were laughed at. A few days later, we got a packet in the mail from your district on how to cope with our transgender child. He was 4. We left. We went elsewhere where the same poor kid was abused by an adult. We were then forced to return here, hoping our kids could just go to school quietly and peacefully. Let's just finish this year out. Nope. Our entire family began getting targeted in quite a few ways, quite a few interpersonal relationships between you two districts. I assure you, people know though, and you all know. Recently, we were told our son was an aggressor in a physical altercation. We punished him. We made him write an apology. We were so confused and disappointed. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, we learned the principal fabricated that entire narrative. This was only discovered when I challenged the principal about discipline towards aggressors. It's always, I can't discuss discipline of other students. So I pointed out, I can speak on my own son, and there it was. Shameful. Your restorative practices do nothing. The district-wide violence is not exclusive to middle and high school students. Your bullying is not exclusive to only students. You want to ban cell phones, that's your focus, to hide and conceal the violence. You want to ban documentation. You should be looking at yourselves. You are all the authority and the leadership here, yet you are all bullies yourselves. With our children 5 days a week, 7 hours a day. Our kids can't go to school without being picked apart, and you focus on phones. It's shameful. It's sad that we came from Milwaukee Public Schools to here, and we actually miss it. At least at MPS, it was exclusive to one student and one adult abusing my child. Here, it's everybody. It's all of you. You have all treated our family ridiculously. Last week, you guys took my 6-year-old daughter and had everybody else in her class tell them exactly what makes them the happiest. And they told her to wait until last. And then they repeatedly asked her over and over again, think of something more serious, maybe something at home. Think of something like, oh, I don't know, maybe if it was better, it would make you happier. And you eventually got the answer that you guys wanted. That is ridiculous. She's 6. I get emails constantly about my son. Well, I just want to let you know he was twirling a pencil today. Leave us alone. We don't even want to be here.
You. Okay, Chuck Kornowski.
Good afternoon. My name is Chuck Kornowski, CHUCK-AORNOWSKI. Corn with a K, right now on a ski. I live at 2158 South 90th Street. I represent we the people of the Constitution here in West Dallas, West Milwaukee, and a small part of New Berlin. I'm also on Facebook, pictured with Sheriff David Clark. You can all see me on Facebook at Chuck Kornowski. And My main concern is there's been a school shooting today in Tennessee. 3 children and 3 staff members shot and killed at a Tennessee school. And with the fighting that we've had in the past, we have to make doubly sure for the staff safety and our children's safety. I live not far from Central. I drive past up Grant every day. And people can sneak in through that back door and back to Central. We need to really start looking at the security issues here at the entire West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District. I know we have, thank God for our West Dallas Police Department. Thank God for them. They're doing a great job. But I think there are little niches and crannies that we have to really watch for. This woman, who was 28 years, was in a Christian school and killed 3 staff members and 3 children. I hope we can do more to protect our staff members and our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Bain?
Hi, Betsy. I'm on Zoom. I live in Washington County now. I lived on Candy Cane Lane for many years. I have worked in the district for 27 years. That's a really, really long time. And under the current retirement plan, I will go till I'm I will have 40 years of service in. Yes. I'm sorry.
Can you state your name and address, please? Sorry, we didn't get that before you started talking.
Oh, sorry. Heather Bain, I live in Washington County.
Can you
I'm sorry, I'm hearing an echo from you, Mr. Lee.
not just Washington County, but your actual address?
W192N16330 Leafon Circle.
Thank you.
So I've been working in the district for 27 years. Under the current retirement plan, I will have 40 years of service in if I go till 62. And the new plan that we're looking at, 57 is better than 62. Absolutely, 100% it is. Where I struggle with it, I understand where with the thought process of what, because I'm if we go to 57, I would be 7 years from retirement. Right now, 62 to 65, okay, that's 3 years until Medicare. So the cash equivalent of 3 years of insurance, and I'm on my own. See you, bye. The spirit of the contracts had always been at least partial insurance until we're Medicare age. And the contracts that I signed when I started with this district 27 years ago versus what I'm being offered now, had I known this is what I was going to be offered at retirement, I don't necessarily know that I would have stayed. I am hoping that the trust that the money will be put into will be an irrevocable trust, so that the younger teachers that we're hoping and praying will continue to stay in our district for 30 years, that what they are promised now will actually be what they get at that time. This is better than 57 is better than 62, no doubt. But I quite frankly was hoping, as someone who's 7 years from retirement, if we go to the new plan, I hope that we can do better for people. And then the whole idea of, here's some money and see ya after 37 years is a tough pill to swallow. Dr. Lexman's fond of saying that we can do anything we want, we just can't do everything. I hope this is adopted. 57 is better than 62, but I also do hope we'll continue to look at how we can do better, especially for those people who are close to retirement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just in time. So that's the last that I had signed up for public comments this evening, and considering our time limit, I'm going to close public comments at this time. And we'll move on to item 8, our board reports, starting with 8.1, which is a review of our board calendar. So we have our regular Board of Education meeting this evening, followed by a financial stability and efficiency workshop, a school consolidation workshop part 4, future district office update, and facility and grounds review, and immediately following we'll have a closed session. On Monday, April 10th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting, followed by a financial stability and efficiency workshop, proposed 23-24 budget and preliminary tax levy number 1, and immediately following we'll have a closed session meeting. On Monday, April 17th at 6 p.m., we have a board workshop, guaranteed and viable curriculum. And then on Monday, April 24th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting where any newly elected board members will be able to take their oath of office. Moving on to 8.2, our board committee reports this evening. 8.2.1, employee engagement and culture, Mr. Keller.
All right, I gotta do this with broken glasses. So we had our last meeting last week on Tuesday, March 21st. We talked a little bit about contract updates. So renewing contracts were sent out to all eligible teachers March 14th. Teachers are asked to return those signed contracts by May 1st. As of the 20th, 36% of the contracts had. We got an update on yearly mandatory staff training. There's a few individuals that are still in need of completing that training. That's been handled so that those people will get that taken care of at the appropriate time. We had a safety committee update. Safety training was held with the board at our last meeting. All schools were completing safety training, and they've been asked to complete those evaluations by April 30th. Members of the safety committee will be meeting with school leadership for the spring safety review, which happened last week as well. And doing digital mapping of schools, which we received a grant from Wisconsin DOJ. Dr. Lexman talked about the school consolidation update. So on Friday, March 17th, 33 teachers were notified of their placement for 23-24 academic year. The teachers that are left will continue to do that through phase 2. And then we additionally got some updated data on substitute teachers and some of the days that are biggest in demand. That's my update.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Brian or his committee regarding his report? I just had 2, I guess. One, what is the digital mapping for that you mentioned? What's the reason why that's being done?
Good question. I just closed that one moment.
Digital mapping. It's for the safety portion.
Yeah, it's so doing basically it's to assist local first responders in case of an emergency. So it's kind of mapping out what the buildings look like in that regard.
Very good. Excellent. And then, I'm sorry, Ms. Geiser.
Sorry, are we beginning to start the like exit and stay interviews?
We have not had an update on that recently, but we will add that to the next agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Other question I was about the subfill rates. Overall, are we seeing a better subfill rate with the changes we had made regarding the salary that we were offering? And I believe there was discussion about changing it to provide a not to exceed amount for administration, so that, as you mentioned, there's certain days where we have a higher need for substitutes in our schools, and that maybe on those days we might be able to offer a higher rate to try and encourage the small pool available in our area for subs to come here.
Yeah, we did not have updated data on that at this last meeting. What we did find out about was, again, some of those days that are most in demand where subs are mostly needed, which not surprisingly are Thursday and Friday. But we can work on getting additional data regarding some of those impacts of the updated sub rate.
Okay. Any other questions about that, or any other items for Mr. Keller's committee for future agendas? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Move on to 8.2.2 financial stability and efficiency, Ms. Kaiser.
Yeah, we met March 23rd, and this is the super fast update because Mr. Norris action items coming tonight are Mr. Norris will be updating about a vaping settlement that we were part of a litigation, and we were awarded some money, which is pretty cool. We have a formal resolution for advocating for public schools through SWASA tonight. That'll be an action item. OPEB approval and approval of Fund 73 Trust will also be an action item tonight. And tonight we'll be having a spring facility workshop regarding plans for district office school consolidation and what to do with the buildings. That's my report.
Very good. Any questions from Ms. Kaiser regarding her report? No, we're going to have a lot more future action items and some workshops this evening. Any future agenda items for her committee? Right, thank you very much. We'll then move on to 8.2.3 Recreation and Community Services. Mr. Sikich.
Thank you, Mr. President. We last met last Monday, the 20th. Committee is working on assessing the need for and learning more about the feasibility of installing AEDs outside of our athletic facilities, and that is automatic external defibrillator. Currently, our athletic trainers carry a portable one with them. However, we know there are many sports competing and practicing during the same times during spring months and often the same at same locations and different locations. Additionally, our athletic facilities are available for public use. All outdoor, all-weather units are different and require a more coordinated approach for their use. Our committee also reviewed the project management proposal submitted for the Lane Recreation and Fitness Center, and we are bringing forward a recommendation for approval to the board this evening.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Sikich regarding his report? Or any future agenda items for them to consider? Our committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Sikich. Moving on to 8.3 board member reports of community events. Any events that board members attended over the last time frame? Mr. Sikich.
I would like to give a shout out to Franklin and Carrie Rapp and Team Enterprise and Team Vision. They did a deeper learning, project-based learning lesson in history, and then they took the most kind of popular, if you will, food during that era and made that food and put together a recipe booklet and had there was a short podcast before explaining what the part of the history was being studied by that individual, and then the food, and then you could walk around and sample some.
Oh.
I'm never afraid of a free meal.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing, Mr. Sikich. Ms. Steele?
Yep. I'll leave the Sodexo thing for you. 'Cause I know you were there too. Actually, Mr. Becker and I went to Irving Elementary on last week, Tuesday. So they, the second grade class there, worked with Flower and Flame, right? Flower Grown Flame, sorry, local business as pizzas, and basically created their own pizza business. It was really cool. They, we got our own seating, little sign that said welcome school board members. They took our orders. Our popcorn was always refreshed. I got a water and a juice. Yeah, and the pizza actually was surprisingly it was very good. So it was just really cool to see the kids all work together and collaborate. And really, honestly, the adults didn't do anything except for pop the pizzas in the oven. So it was a fun experience.
Awesome. Yeah, and that was something we learned about that project during the school showcases that we had last week. So that's great to be able to experience it in person.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Anyone else with any events that they attended they would like to report back on? And I gotta see if Mr. Becker has any, because where is he? Oh, yes, he's raising his hand. Can you switch the audio over, please, Brandon? I think you can.
Maybe you could share next time.
Yeah.
He's still talking.
Who's
I'm sure what you shared was a wonderful experience you had in University. Unfortunately, we did not hear it. And so what I would encourage you to do is please keep that for next board meeting and please share it at that point. I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you. Technical difficulty. I'm not sure what's going on. But thank you. I appreciate the effort. Mr. Becker is taking time out of his vacation to still participate in the board meeting. So I appreciate that. Any other events that board members would like to report on? So I'll say the one that Amy talked about, which was the Future Chefs competition that Suxo has been having for our elementary students for the last several years. I was honored to be asked to be a judge again, which is always a very difficult job because students that have been selected have always, kind of gone through a rigorous process already to get to that point. And so they all had very interesting and great recipes for us to try and judge basically. And yes, there was a shout out to Hunter who had won from Walker this year. So I just want to congratulate all the students that participated, even ones that didn't make that far. It's a great thing our district does to encourage interest in not only culinary arts, but also in healthy eating and thinking about different ways that you can put together a meal. And also want to obviously give a shout out to Steve and his team for the efforts they do to help the students prepare things. And I always put a bug in Steve's ear every year. We want to expand this to the secondary level. So I've been given some assurances that may be happening next year, maybe not in this is a region-wide and then statewide and nationwide thing that they do, but maybe even just locally, especially after we are able to complete the culinary kitchen at Dotkey, which will be done ready for next school year. So we can actually hold the event there at that time. So that's what I'm hoping. So it's a great event. Congratulations to everyone who participated. Okay. So any other board member reports? I'll close 8.3. So 8.4 is on the docket here. I don't have any updates. Dr. Robinson was here a few weeks ago. He was here for a week, attended many school meetings, and I met with a lot of other individuals. And so it was a great opportunity for him to learn and to just kind of get a feel for kind of what's going on in the district. And so I know he does have another trip planned, I believe, in April sometime, but when we get closer to that, we'll make sure to communicate that out and what his agenda is at that time. So other than that, I don't have any additional update items. So move on to 9, our consent agenda for this evening, starting with 9.1, approval of minutes of a regular Board of Education meeting on March 13th and a board workshop from March 20th. 9.2, the employment summary. 9.3, supplementary contracts, and 9.4, our financial summary. Does anyone need anything separated out?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Joe has a thumbs up there. So that one's good. All right, and then we're going to move on to item 10, starting with our action items this evening with 10.1, approval of the West Elsis Milwaukee School Safety Resolution. That's myself and Dr. Lexman, but I'm going to switch the audio over to Dr. Lexman so he can give his introduction.
Sure. Can everybody hear me? Great, thank you. So what you have in front of you this evening, first, what the board did in closed session a couple weeks ago was entirely appropriate. Remember, it included a meeting with the board's attorney, and we talked about specific student matters which are considered confidential. The resolution itself was drafted after that and is now being considered in open session. The resolution, well, first of all, what I want to start with is what I did in the video as well that we shared on Friday to start communicating this, is just a reminder that the vast majority of kids come to school and do the right thing every day. They do. They're in good places where they're safe, where they're having fun, where they're learning. You just shared a number of examples of some of that really interesting work. But that being said, our district, like so many, and I'm having that conversation over and over again today with colleagues that are at this conference, about everybody trying to figure out that the systems, the interventions, the supports aren't working for all kids in terms of managing behavior. And I think that's why until we can figure that out in a way that is really going to meet the needs of kids, changing the code of conduct and doing some other things to me seem entirely appropriate, right? So that, as I described in the video, what's been taking place cannot continue. So there's really 4 things in the resolution that if the board approves it would then start to go into effect. You know, one is adding a category called fighting major, and that would have disciplinary levels of 4 and 5, which is a up to 5 days out of school suspension or long-term removal from school. And that would mean in some cases a pre-expulsion contract, and others it may be a recommendation for expulsion. So that's one change. The second change was changing the taunting, baiting, egging on of a fight from a level to levels 3 through 5. Right, so it was a 1 to 3 and move that to a 3 to 5. And then we've also added another category under recording images of another person. And this really is the concern about when fights get recorded and shared, that it creates a much larger disruption to the learning environment. It's not so much that we're trying to hide fights. Everybody knows we're struggling with more fights in school. What we're trying to do is minimize the disruption to the learning environment, and that would have disciplinary levels of 3 to 5. And then the fourth thing, all of those would go into effect April 3rd, again, assuming the board approves all of this evening. Then what would go into effect on April 17th is what we're talking about is a cell phone ban, and maybe a ban is it's a not entirely accurate way to describe it, but to really have much more management around the student use of cell phones during the regular school day. We've been intentional in the language here. So it says based on each school's implementation plan. And because we're introducing this, you know, right at the end of a school year with not a lot of notice, there's going to have to be a little bit of leeway for schools to figure out how to make this work for them. I think we have really good example at FLW, and it's just become part of their routine. So I think there's some things that can be learned from Jason and the leadership team there to help the other schools. But each school then needs a couple of weeks, and there's the PD day on April 10th that allow teams of teachers and the leadership in each building to work on this. And again, it'll be followed by a significant amount of communication. So the resolution then acknowledges all of that, would, with approval, would introduce those 4 new things. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
So Marty or Noah, whomever would like to answer. I'm most concerned about the 4th resolution and waiting until April 17th to hear the plans. So tonight I would vote yes to banning, and again, I'm not sure on that word, but I would do that without having seen the plan that the administration from each school would be bringing forth. And secondly, I worry and I'm concerned with different schools having different plans. Are we looking for continuity so that if this happens at Central or Hale or anywhere else?
That's a current plan.
Well, but they're changing their plan. They're going to bring forth a plan for the cell phones on April 17th. But they're still going to be separate plans. And I'm wondering, is that something as a board? Do we want that? Do we want it to be the same across the board? Is that an issue? I think that we need to talk about that as a group.
Before, I don't know if Dr. Luxman has or Deidre has any response to that before I,
Sure,
in case there is has been discussion. My general understanding is the plans won't be brought forward for us for approval. It's essentially, we're saying if we approve this, there's a cell phone ban, and then the buildings will determine among themselves who don't already have plans, bans in place, how they want to enforce those bans.
And I'm saying I'm uncomfortable with that because I want to know what it is before we move forward and just say, okay, go ahead and do that piece. I want to know more about it. And all we're doing is saying, yes, you can create a plan. And I think that we need more information on that.
Deidre has her hand raised. Brandon, if you can switch the audio.
Yeah, Jane, I understand that. And I think there is there's always within our strategic plan, things that we've agreed to hold in common at all the school sites, and then things that are really up to the teachers and the staff at that school site as the way they want to enforce it. They do things very differently as far as removing cell phones from the building at FLW than they do at West. And it was because the teachers at those schools were a part of making that plan that will work for them, that will work for the building, that will work for the administration as well. So certainly we will be more than happy to share those plans once they're complete. But given the fact that this is a recent decision, right? And we put a lot of time and effort into meeting with the principals to get this far with the resolution, because we don't want to put anything in there that we can't be consistent that we're actually going to follow through and do. But they have not had time to meet with staff. And that was the one thing that teachers have expressed some concern over, as well as some interest in, is do they get input into exactly how this is going to be navigated at each school? It looks very different at West, where there are 320 students, versus Hale, where there are 1,300. So that's going to just look different. So that's the, kind of challenge that we're in right now. We pushed it to April 17th because there is a professional development day on April 10th, which gives the schools time to meet together when they're not rushed to try to ramrod something through, to make sure that it's something that works for the building to be able to consistently enforce.
Why it's not uniformed, and I was just asking that question. So we'll never be presented as a board as to what they decided. Not that we would vote on it, but will we ever find out what they decided to do at each particular school? Just
on the audio. Did he switch it? Okay. Yeah, Jane, I'm happy to share those in board updates as soon as each one of the schools kind of has their plan. And remember, some parts of this are going to be a little trial and error. This is new. We are glad I understand there's people in the audience tonight. I know there's some people watching online, and we're glad that people are participating and supporting and working hand in hand with us. Parents, we're going to need your support with this to make sure that you're really clear with your students as they send, as you send your child to school, that this is the expectation and that they follow the school's plan at each school site. And so that part will be all very, very important. I am more than happy to share the actual plans with the board and a board update. Families who have an interest, well, obviously all families will know from that individual school site what the plan is at that school, because again, we will need that partnership from our families to make sure this can be effective at school. And anybody else who has an interest can always put in an open records request for something like that.
Other questions, concerns, comments?
Well, I'm just wondering in regards to what the one mom out there had shared with, her student that has the ADD, is how can we manage that situation too? Because my son also had that, before cell phones and all putting everything on social media like everybody does today. But where it can be used as a tool to actually help them get through the school day. So is there a way that, and again, I know that this is all coming together very quickly, but whether it is, a therapist note, a doctor's note or something, so that those kids who are actually using it as a tool, whose teachers are aware of that, can still be able to do that during that class time or that particular time. Because again, having a child that went through stuff like that, like I get that, and so I don't want, if that is something that they're utilizing and it's working, I don't want to yank that from them. So how can we work that into play? And I get it's not as easy just saying, okay, this kid can and this kid can't, because I know there's going to be gray areas and there's going to be some that like it and some that don't. And well, you're always going to upset somebody, but I don't want to see that be a negative against that population of kids that it's working for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering how we can somehow navigate that in there, that there's that exception, and again, whether it be a doctor, therapist, or something, proving like this is what it's used for, so that other teachers are aware or written into Skyward or something, just so that it's there for them, that they can have that to fall back on.
Can I jump on that real quick? Because it's pretty much the same topic. I know my son had a similar instance last year because the communities in the middle schools can get quite large. And my son was in a situation where he was just distracted because it was just too loud. And the teacher actually recommended put earbuds in, listen to music, and focus on the work that you need to get done. So I would agree. I think in cases like that, we need to find a way to be flexible. With that said, there's earbuds. There's no reason for the phone to be in your hand. I would think there's ways to work around that.
Right.
But yeah, I think it would be important to have some flexibility for that.
Yeah. Just somehow so we can address that.
And it just goes back to the plan, so what is the plan? And so we say yes tonight. And I just think that I, as a board member, would like to know what that plan will be, whether or not, on the 18th, whenever it is implemented, I need to hear more about it. I need follow up.
Because Noah can't see, we don't take comments during this part of the meeting. It's only during public comments. So I'm sorry, but I wanted to let you know because I saw your hand up. Yeah, and we can't respond right now, but please follow up with us if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Please do.
All right, Deidre had a response.
Certainly, we're going to have some students who have a 504 plan or an IEP that have access to things like music during the day. Sometimes that could be through a phone. If we aren't having phones, there's other devices we can use throughout the day. For the mom that spoke in public comment, I jotted down her name as well, and I'll send her information back to the school. We do all kinds of accommodations and supports through MLSS plans. We do all kinds of things through, again, 504 plans or IEP needs if that's the needs that her child are having. So if families are having those specific concerns, that's certainly the way that those things could be accommodated and then officially documented. The challenge is going to be that we're going to have a lot of people who then say, well, my doctor says my kid should have their phone because they're afraid of this or afraid of this. And the more exceptions to the rules we have, the harder it is for staff to monitor. So there's certainly ways to get on music on your Chromebook or other things that might be a better way to access that than allow this random variety of students to have phones or not phones. But that's certainly something I'll add to the list for the principals when they are doing their meetings at the school level.
Yeah, and I think that I agree as far as, reporting back to the board about what was decided. I think consistency is very important. I don't necessarily know if it needs to be consistent across buildings, especially since we already have some bans in place at 2 of our schools that they chose to do. And I think it's important to reiterate, this is not something that maybe the public realizes, but the district policy has allowed cell phone bans this entire time. And that's why some schools have decided to do that. But at the time, it was decided that it was not going to be a district decision. It was going to be an individual school level decision, and it was up to the staff and the administration there if they wanted to do a ban to enact that, and then how they wanted to see it, which is why West and FLW have kind of their own pieces in place. But I think once a building has decided this is how we're going to go about doing the ban, then it has to be communicated explicitly to every staff member, like this is how it's going to be enforced. These are the steps that are taken. If you do this and this is the response, then the next step is this and the next step is this. And that is consistently followed every single time because it is new. It is mid-year. So a change like this, I understand, is going to be difficult. I think some grace is going to be necessary as we move through this. And the other thing that should be noted is, according to the resolution, this is only through the end of the school year. So it would require additional changes. And I think that's part of the code of conduct review that is happening over the summer, or at least that would, if this resolution is passed, to see if this is something that that the board would want to continue doing a district-wide ban or go back to the policy we had before. And I think this might be a good opportunity to kind of see how things go.
Yeah, I think can you hear me? No. Yep. Okay. Yeah, that isn't the really important thing that I was also going to point out, Noah. So thanks for sharing that. Like, this resolution is carrying us forward from now to the end of the year. And again, within the policy, within the current practice and policy, there are do's and don'ts. So some teachers say there's no phones in my class and some teachers allow phones. And that's been That flexibility worked well for us for some time, and it is currently not working well for us. So just like anything else within the continuous improvement process, you look at what's working and what's going well, you look at what you're struggling with, and you make adjustments. So everyone is clear, like the first few weeks of doing this are going to have some, oh, we didn't think of that, right? They're going to do a very thorough plan, but they're going to come back with, oh, we didn't think of that. And that's where it's so important for that longer review of the code of conduct this summer that'll have teachers and custodians who sometimes are involved in engaging in some of this work, and secretaries and school leaders to all really look at it together. That's the time where if we want something to be consistent across all the schools, that committee of people would come forward with a recommendation like that, getting something that we have said, this is how you're going to do it, and each school is going to do that at this point in the school year, would put quite a burden on the schools that I don't think is fair. So that's kind of there's a short-term approach to it that's going to take some iterations. So you're likely going to get one copy of this is how we're doing it at this school. And then in a couple of weeks, you'll get we're actually going to do this instead of that, because we figured out what was working and what wasn't.
Yeah, I do have some concern about the consistency across the schools as well. But I don't know that I necessarily need the plans to be the same. I would like to be able to see that what data we're taking from this is consistent from school to school, so that it can inform our decisions on whatever reviews we do for the code of conduct. So if they're doing things that, wow, that did not work, that's recorded, that's collected. And these things, though, we have less fights, we have less arguments, we have like whatever it is, I think we should at least have some consistency with data collection so that we can make an informed choice on whether or not this does anything for us as we move forward.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I think, I mean, we've seen the data of where we're at as far as like specific line by line instances for each school. And so that, is a perfect baseline that we can then try to compare to see what is the rate, are we seeing a rate change once we make these changes as far as the cell phones, but also the increases in discipline. And if those things together have the desired effect, or do they have a effect that we aren't realizing that we're going to have, is important to monitor, so that if there's additional pivoting that needs to happen, even before the end of the year, if we see some very negative changes in a different way, we might need to look at that. But I think at this point, this is trying to address the ongoing issues we've seen in our schools. And, I don't want to point out, like, so people say, well, why did it wait? Why did it take so long? It's because, as Dr. Lexman pointed out, we have a lot of other strategies that we've used for years to try and prevent these things from happening. And generally they work. And they do still work for a lot of students. But what we're seeing now is that more students they're not working for. And so over the course of this year, we did bring in other strategies, other more personnel into schools to try and help with this situation. And we just have not been seeing the changes that we want to, the reductions that we want to in these events, which has led to this. So it's not that we're just finally doing something. It's just that the other interventions that we've had in place and the additional things that we added during the school year have not brought those levels down to what we want to see. And so that is why we're here now, in the hopes that these changes will make it very, very clear that it's unacceptable behavior that we cannot have moving forward. And the addition of the cell phone piece is really focused on, especially with some of the events where it's all about filming the event and sharing that event and using those cell phones to plan the events. And that is why this is being included in this piece. And the hope is that by removing that opportunity, that maybe that will also help in the reduction of these events. So the data piece, is that something that we can focus on, Dr. Lexman and Deidre? Dr. Lexman, you want to say something?
Sure. Yeah, a little bit of what we talked about internally in terms of the communication strategy is I would produce a short video each Friday about how this is going. and include some of those data points that this week we've had X number of incidents of this type. Just so that we really are monitoring and just publicly talking about it, is it working or not? So that is the intent. And we think it'll be important to capture that, because that really is the longer term strategy. Is if this is working, well, we need to make these changes permanent. If it's not, we need the data to help inform a different set of strategies. But yes, that is the intent.
Right. I have a few things. First of all, was this shared with the Teachers Association, and did we get feedback in terms of their thoughts?
It was shared a little bit later than I would have liked, but it was shared and there was some feedback that was provided. But I think that's where the consistency piece comes in, ensuring that number one, it's consistent, and number two, that the administrators at those individual buildings understand and know that once that plan is in place for their building, you know, from the principal down, they have to make sure that we're following that plan consistently every single time when needed. And I do agree with teachers' comments. You know, we have to be careful how many exceptions are allowed. You know, we have individuals on IEPs and other plans in which that will be allowed, but if there's too many exceptions, then it does become a real crapshoot in trying to say, are they supposed to, are they not supposed to, that sort of thing. So with the plans that are coming forth, I'm hopeful that those things will be taken into account, so that students like we heard about today and others that might be like, I need to have something to be able to help me focus, but it's not an official IEP or other plan, that we can provide accommodations utilizing district equipment in order to be able to manage that, so that it's not a question of should you have your phone or not. It's like, okay, what do you need to get on your Chromebook, or what do you need to get on your iPad in order to be able to do what and have what you need to focus in? Because we certainly don't want to put a policy in place that has been pointed out. Well, you know, we want to increase our achievement, right? So we don't want to dampen that by trying to, in turn, have an effect on our safety and our issues with the fighting in schools. So we certainly do not want to do that either.
Okay. The second thing I was going to say, obviously with this resolution being on the agenda, I think it says a message to the public, parents, and staff that this is a priority for us right now, which means there's a lot of eyes on it. So my point is, I want to make sure that our staff feels supported, that if there are issues and they're reported, they are handled accordingly, and that we're getting regular updates on that. I think we had talked about before, you know, getting regular updates on climate and culture from each of the schools to see how things are going. And again, we have to talk about the best mechanism for that, because I think there's still ways that needs to be worked out to make sure we're getting the appropriate information. But I think it's important that we do that. No matter what we decide and what is voted on, we need to be sure that everything is being followed the way that it's supposed to be followed. That's my concern. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments or questions?
I motion to approve.
I have one thing. So there's one other thing that has been brought up, and that is technology. So some classrooms utilize the students' phones as part of the coursework that's happening, either whether it's looking things up or using it for other things within the classroom. And so I just want assurances basically that we have the technology available to students, so that again, we're not having a dampening effect on the education piece by removing phones, and ensuring that that's part of this planning process, that if this is passed, would be discussed and determined and figured out by the time that ban goes into place.
Right.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Okay, so yes, and that's a little bit also why we need some time and allow schools to do some planning. There are some unique circumstances where families have elected not to sign the acceptable use policy. And so then those students wouldn't have access to a district provided device. So there's just, and that's not large numbers. These are small numbers, and sometimes it's just a little more one-on-one time with that family and a principal to get those documents signed so that we do have replacement technology. But again, it's, we have to work our way through this together to figure out the right kind of balance of implementation that achieves the goal of reducing disruptions because there's cell phones present, but also doesn't negatively impact learning, right? And it's a hard balance. And that's why I think Deidre's point was exactly right. We're going to have to go through some iterations to get this to work. But all of that is definitely, I think, in everybody's awareness about, what kids need and shouldn't need regarding their cell phones.
And just to answer your question, no, we do have enough devices or this shouldn't be a problem. And if we have to move some around from one school to the other because things get broken or other things need to happen, we can do that. The technology plan had those in the technology plan the last time. So that should not be a concern. And it was at one point, which is partially where we did not have previously a cell phone ban because we did not have devices for every single student.
You know what? I better check with Joe. Mr. Becker, I don't know if we can hear you. Do you have any questions or concerns? And
You could type them in the chat.
trying something. I just want to make sure he has an opportunity if he has anything he would like to bring up. Do you have something to say, Joe? So right now it shows your phone is muted, so I don't know if you can try switching the audio, Brandon, to see if you can hear him. Try saying. Okay. No, okay. All right, he's good. Just want to make sure everyone has a chance. All right, is there anything else? Then I would look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Just want to get Joe's a thumbs up. Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much, everyone. So we will then move on to 10.2 Recreation and Fitness Center. Ms. Stresser.
Good evening, everyone. We're here tonight to recommend and ask the board to approve us entering into a contract with CG Schmidt. Per board policy, we issued the RFP through our public sources, local media, and then we also sent it directly to a number of companies that either we had worked with in the past or had indicated an interest. Of all that, we received 2 proposals in review. Aaron and Steve were on that committee as well. The 2 proposals originally came back pretty much equal. So we went back to both and sought out additional information, primarily what their fee schedule would be. And then most recent projects within the city of West Dallas, because we want to ensure that there's a good working relationship there. And from that, our committee unanimously decided to recommend moving forward with CG Schmidt.
Okay, any questions?
I was just gonna move
Just say move to approve.
on behalf of our committee. I move to, we approve this.
Okay. We have a motion, Joe's cool, second, all right. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes.
All right.
Thank you very much. Minimizing and, all right, then we have 10.3 swim team co-op boys and girls, Ms. Strasser.
All right, so current board policy does not require board approval for co-op renewals and or new co-ops within our district. But this one's a little bit different. This is a current co-op, but they would like to add a third non-district school. It's for both boys and girls swim with, starting next school year. And it would be with Martin Luther High School, who's currently also not part of either one of our two conferences. But it would stay, as LaSalle Central managing the co-op, and they would compete in the Woodland. This would really help with numbers. Like majority of our sports, we are seeing in decline. Dive in particular, we've had no athletes. So this would help bolster our program, help them be a little bit more competitive in our conference.
Any questions?
No, not a question, but I need to recuse myself. My wife coaches one of those teams.
Very good. All right, thank you.
All right, motion to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None and one refusal. Thank you very much. All right, moving on, 10.4, resolution in support of investing in our public schools, 2023-2025 biennial budget. And Mr. Norris is getting set up, so I will riff a little bit. Let him get water or something. I'm good.
Okay.
Second resolution. Slides.
Is it 60 slides or what?
It is not. I've become aware that that's my new, like it's the expectation. So I'm gonna try to do my best to defeat that over the next few months. So.
Brandon's coming.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for having me. Appreciate it this evening. I have a number of things to talk about tonight, but the first thing is kind of an extension of our preliminary budgets, which we discussed at the end of February. This is more of a formal advocacy piece that I'd be asking the board to take formal action on in terms of resolution to the investment in public schools. So I think earlier tonight, he was mentioned that we're a part of the organization called SWASA, and that's an organization that the board participates in, the administration participates in, which is a local kind of consortium of 30 districts that is an advocacy piece that works to I guess petition the legislature in conjunction with Governor Revers to fund public schools, and they do that through a variety of ways, but essentially advocating with local legislatures across not just our community, but all communities, right? So I wanted to go through a bit of school funding history and finance history, and then take questions and ultimately hope to get your approval that we advocate for that as the day of the Capitol was this past week. So have a presentation. It is not 66 slides, it's just a few slides, but just to give a brief background. So we'll just jump right in. So the first thing I want to talk through is some school funding history. So this table, and I have a few tables tonight that I want to talk through, which I think you will find show some very powerful information. And the theme I want to present tonight is that the erosion of public funds and public entities is not a one-time thing. And I think that's to some of our detriment as we think back in the history of Wisconsin in terms of school funding, is that we easily can point to Act 10 as the only time in history that we believe, right, that public funding was taken from schools. I think that is maybe intentional by some people to be an illusion of the truth. So I want to present that tonight as kind of the basis of what I'm showing you tonight this evening. So this is a table that shows you back to 23,
or 2013-14, kind of what we received in terms of per pupil revenue versus what the CPI number was that year. And the reason I show you CPI is because that is historically prior to 2007 or 2008, 2009 is how schools were funded, right? So you can see over the last biennial budget, the public schools across the state received no additional dollars in the per pupil revenue cap, while CPI, which over the last 2 years was almost 6% over 2 years, the highest it had ever been in the recent history. Now, this year it's just over 8%, and the funding at this point is unknown. So just a quick snapshot, I'll come back to this, but just to give you a basis, like we are looking this evening to compare and contrast those two pieces, okay? This is a nice table that shows you 4 columns, right? And the far left is the school year. So this goes back to 08-09. The second column is called the under prior indexing resources, which is what it used to be called. And so that is the CPI index. So that's what schools were funded using prior to 2008, 2009. And to give a bit of history, in 2008, 2009, as you can all recall, that's the year of when there's a major recession in the country, which also ultimately led to Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin, having a budget deficit or overall deficit, which launched campaigns and things like that of that nature, which led to a governor shift as well. So the third column is the per pupil adjustment actual combined. So what that is that's the new revenue limit process or I guess funding model that we received dollars. And so in 08-09, you can see that under the old model and the new model, we received the same amount, which nets a difference of 0. Okay, that's kind of how this table works. So you can see each year, kind of over the years, the CPI, or the second column, I probably should just title it CPI. The CPI model would have netted more dollars for public schools across each year almost, right? So to kind of click through, you can see Act 10 here, where our school district lost $842 per pupil that year, right? That was a large decrease, very difficult, right? Now, at that time, schools, because that was a revenue reduction, schools were given the authority to reduce expense reductions, right? So at that time, all employees were then, I guess, tasked with paying for part of their pension, which that wasn't a thing prior to Act 10. Additionally, schools were allowed to have staff pay for portions of their health insurance, right? Things like that had to change because certainly with $842 per student across an 8,000-ish membership, that's significant dollars that districts would lose, right? So just want to point to this here. So on the far left here, you can see that Governor Evers has asked the legislature to approve a per pupil increase of $1,000 over 2 years. Now, that may seem like an astronomical amount of money given what we've recently received, but at the table you can see if you compare with the $1,000 proposal, we are still using the old index model to today. With the $1,000, we're still $3,234 short per kid. So I just want to put that in reference, right? That's where we're at. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that. That's what I want to do tonight. This again is the same table you just saw. So these are the years prior to in yellow, which is 2023, 24 years we haven't had yet, right? This parenthesis here shows you which years we're pointing to post Act 10, right? And the reason I want to show you this is because I think there's the thinking amongst most advocates in public education that don't go beyond Act 10 to go, well, that was the only year you lost, right? No, it's not. So over that year, over the span, post Act 10, 2012 to 2022, we've lost $2,236 per pupil, almost 3 times the amount we lost in Act 10. So again, the erosion of public education happens slowly, right? The wealthiest 1% didn't get wealthy because Ronald Reagan, they did over 12 administrations, right? It's happened slowly. It happens behind closed doors. It's slow and steady, but they take and take and take and take. So that equates to $16.9 million in this year's budget, right? $16.9 million in this year's budget, or $190 million over the 10-year span. That's just after Act 10, not including Act 10. This table shows you just another visual of kind of how that looks. So you can see the big spike below zero in 2011-12. That's Act 10 when that happened. And you can see that this is a 1 year snapshot. So the only year that we would be above the CPI model is if you look at 24-25. 403 is the projection for CPI at this point. With how unstable the inflation market is, I probably wouldn't trust that, but given the information we have from SWASA and other CPI markers, that's what we know of. But you can see where that's at. So the last thing I'll show you is I'm like, well, how much have we lost by year total, right? So you can see each year where there's a negative deficit between the CPI indexing model and our revenue model, you can see how much money this district did lose by having a new model. So you can see in the first year, zero, because we received the same funding as what CPI would have given us. Next year, 625,000. But you can see, look at this aggregately shows you each year, right? So in this year's budget, 24 million, just under $25 million. This year we would receive that and much additional funds. And this shows you that over the course of this table, it's $250 million. So yeah, not much more to say on that. So with that, I guess to finish up, this is another graphic just to show you the same picture of the difference in what we would have received. And then lastly, I mean, there are reasons that this table, which was recently published by ABC News, is real, right? The national teacher shortage is a huge issue. And, you know, of course that I always go back to this in 2011-12, when Act 10 happened. No, there wasn't a national teacher shortage the next year or the year after that, or the year after that, because these things take time to see the impacts of, right? So it's the 19-year-old kid in 2011 that maybe wanted to be a teacher that didn't go be a teacher. And it's the senior in high school today that goes, the parent at home goes, you shouldn't go be a teacher. And, you know, in 15 years, this is what happens, right? So it's the slow erosion of these things that has detrimental impact. And the saying goes, you defund to privatize. And this is a great example of what that looks like. So with that, I would ask the board to, this is the last slide. I'd ask the board to really deeply consider approving the resolution. I think it says everything about some of the challenges we've had, and we continue to talk about retention and compensation and fixing our schools and things like that. And this board, I think in conjunction with our administration, our teachers association, our staff, have been very good fiscal stewards with their dollars and doing the right thing with them for the right reasons. And so I think this is another good piece for us to consider taking action on.
So I usually let other people talk first, but I'm going to say something first on this. And that's number one, thank you for doing this. A lot of times when we have resolutions, we just read the resolution and then pass it. Yeah. So I think context, especially in this avenue, is very important. Will this presentation be available on our website somewhere to be available for the public to view?
I can have Amanda publish that with me.
Because I think it's very important to see, because you're exactly right. These are not things that in 1 year we see a decrease or 1 year we see a detrimental effect. It's cumulative over time. Something that public schools have been having to deal with for a long time now. And now we're seeing the effects of that. And not even to discuss the differences between funding in public schools and the outcomes of public schools, i.e. test scores and other achievement, and where Wisconsin used to rank and where Wisconsin ranks now in our country, just our country, not even the world, but the country in comparison pre and post Act 10. Yeah. So I think those are very important things that people need to be reminded about. These are not things that are happening in vacuums. And one event that happens in one place can have a very, very far-reaching ripple effect downstream. So with my talking done, and any other comments or things that we want to have before we take action on this?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, I gotta find Joe. Joe's a thumbs up. Any opposed? That passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Norris. We'll move on to 10.5 vaping settlement JUUL organization, Mr. Norris.
So I'm trying to think what I have here. I'm going to, should I undock? Because I don't have a presentation here for this. It's more of a.
You got a different one?
What's that?
The presentation is on a different one, or you don't?
There's no presentation for this one for the next one. Maybe I'll just bring up the next one.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure, you can just leave it there like it's.
Yeah.
Like this. There we go. Okay. So the vaping settlement, this is kind of an interesting discussion, but I think overall good news. So to give a little background. So it's kind of a little bit of background, then there's some far reaching background. So I'll start with kind of recently. So how this came up. So last fall, not in 2022, but in 21-22, Caitlin Windler, former director of finance operations, and I were on a federal funding conference call, kind of a Zoom. So we have state calls and we also have national calls, right? So we happened to be able to tune into this national federal funding kind of call, and we were able to, hear about ESSER funding and things like that going on across the country. There's generally a new administration taking place in the White House. Sometimes it has effects on special ed funding, things like that. So it's good information to hear about. So at this call, there was a gentleman that was working on behalf of the California Public Schools who had taken litigation against the vaping company named JUUL, right? And so, not to get too deep into the essence of their claim, but for most of you who can recall, back in the 90s, the organization which partnered with school districts took action against Big Tobacco for targeting minors, essentially making them lifetime customers. So you can all recall that, right? So this plaintiff essentially took the same legal stance against JUUL because it's the same idea. It's addictive substance, targeting minors, et cetera, et cetera. So there's initially 6 school districts in California that started the litigation and spent, I don't use unlimited, but a lot of money to get this off the ground. So using the same playbook, this France law group, hope I'm saying their name right, took the opportunity to present this idea of they were going to go after this JUUL organization for big time dollars against the damages they've done in the schools, and the schools are having to respond to these issues, right? So it came at no cost to the district. So Caitlin and I said, well, yeah, we can sign up and be a plaintiff on this lawsuit, right? Which is I saw no harm, right? So got the email and then eventually the phone call 2 weeks ago from the Franz Law Group saying that they had settled with 2 of the 3, I guess, agencies that make up JUUL Corporation, which is kind of odd. I thought about. So there's 3 entities that make up JUUL. Okay, the board of directors, the actual company, and then there's a PAC fund called Altria, who is the I guess a big money contributor to this organization. So Franz Law Group has settled with JUUL and the board of directors for the settlement that I'm going to talk about tonight. So it costs the district no money, and obviously the payment that they would receive comes out of the settlement, right? So I got the phone call, and they were able to settle for our district based on the size, enrollment, geographic location, some of our demographics. For the district to receive just under $134,000 for this lawsuit, of which we'd received just over $87,000 of it. So, actually, when I talked to William, the attorney that represented our region, there's 1,000 total districts, right? He felt bad talking to me. He's like, I thought we could get you more, but we actually settled for less to get guaranteed payment because a lot of these organizations go Chapter 51 and they're done. And so it's like you see these massive lawsuits happen. It's like they don't really get the money. It's kind of a headline, right? So in the action item, you can see that we'll receive 50% of the $87,000 in fiscal year 24 next year. And then each year after that, we receive 12.5% of it each December for the next 4 years. So it's something that we will receive. It'll take some time, but after he explained that to me, I did agree with their stance. Like, let's get something rather than nothing, given that, 90% of the big lawsuits that happened result in nothing. So, or very little, right? So overall, I mean, really, the board would need to take formal action to approve this portion of the settlement for 2 of the 3. There at a future date could be a settlement with this PAC group Altria for other funds, but at this point, that's what we have. So
what bucket does that go into? What will we do with that? particular money?
It would go into the general fund.
General fund?
Yeah, and so next year we'd receive just under 44,000. So, as we go into budget approval and we get into the discussions, which are coming up April 10th, certainly things we can talk about, and gives us opportunities to fund some, priorities, whether it's safety or facilities or, part-time staff, things like that. Certainly not sustainable dollars, but stuff definitely to help with. So. Yeah, good enough.
Considering where we're getting it from, is there a need in our schools for, we may already have like cessation programs and things like that for students that obviously had a vaping issue earlier in the year. That maybe we could put some of these dollars towards in an attempt to try and help our students who maybe did something they regret now and are in attempt to do it. So I know we won't know until we get there, but just an idea. Since we're getting them essentially for that purpose. The reason why we're getting the money is because of what they did do. And I don't know again how many students that encompasses in our district, but maybe something to look into and see if we can utilize some of those funds to help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any options on the table, and certainly that would be the dollars that it was intended for directly to the source. I think that's a great opportunity. So.
Any other questions? Just checking on Mr. Becker. No, he looks okay. All right, look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, Mr. Becker is a thumbs up. That passes. And then we'll move on to 10.6, restructuring other post-employment benefits for all employees, Mr. Norris.
So as we get started here, Kristen's passing out kind of a letter I received from Mr. Greg Gels and his wife, Miss Jamie Gels. They both have been in the district for a number of years. I just wanted to, they weren't able to be here tonight with spring break, so they had emailed me this, and I thought I'd share that with the board to read at your leisure, but they had sent this in support of the OPEB proposal and just wanted to share their thoughts and words with you. So I assured them that I'd make sure you got this evening. So with that, I also have the plans that I passed out the last meeting. So I know you've seen them a number of times. So I have them here. If you'd like them, let me know. I'm happy to give you another copy of them.
Has anything changed?
Nothing is, at this point, just, minute nominal details that would not impact the structure. Mr. Sickett already has it there, so there you go. So if you'd like them, I'm happy to pass them out. I can certainly do that if you'd like.
I mean,
I have them here, so
I think we're okay. If we have questions, then
absolutely. So with that, I'm going to jump into a short presentation. Much of this is information you've already heard, but much less than 66 slides. So we'll go right through this quick.
65.
No, I believe it's 20.
Wow.
So just kind of a recap. So review the timeline. We'll go talk about the open proposal, just a quick refresh. The revised retirement language. We're talking about the trust a bit, ask questions, and then action for the board to take on restructuring the benefit. So just a quick reminder of the timeline. So this has been just under a year in development. So want to thank everyone that is both here, the association, my team that's worked closely, Ken Zaster, who's unable to be here. I believe he's on vacation too for spring break. I want to thank the executive team for all their support and the long hours they've put on this. And then also certainly the school board here this evening for taking that courage to take this. And there were countless numbers of staff that I talked to through the process, and we're just overly thrilled about this. And they feel very strongly, in my opinion, from, some of the things we talked about tonight, the erosion of public funds. Well, historically, you can think back to Act 10 when those funds and revenues were cut. What gets taken? It's benefits, it's salary, and the people who lose are the people that this affects the most. So I just want to thank each one of you for, supporting us to work through a plan that I think helps everybody in the district. So with that, you can see the dates we've had here, and then kind of what would be next pending the approval of the board this evening would be working with John Shore, our legal attorney, to formalize and open the trust, which would not be able to take place till after the first action board meeting in April. And then from there, we would create the trust and work to create the accounts and get those to staff by the end of the year. So the review, we talked about this before, but unfunded practices really ended post Act 10, given the revenue decline that you've seen that has happened well beyond Act 10, but the large one that changed this benefit was then. And then speaking to some of the staff that had spoken this evening about, hoping that dollars can be shifted into staff compensation. This points directly to that being an issue and something that I know is one of the board's priorities and also the administration's priority to fix. So ranking in the 92nd percentile for open benefits, but also in the 28th percentile for active staff. I do want to reference that with our proposal this evening, I don't believe our percentile there for our OPEB benefit will drop too much because we're still offering a very rich benefit. We're just how we're funding it is the model that we're changing. So I do think that actually we can maintain a very high status among where we're at in the state among our retirement benefit. It's we're changing the way we fund it, which will allow us to free up dollars to fix or to address the staff compensation issue. So I think that is a good thing. But given these reasons, districts moved away from that. So the goal, as I talked about before, to shifting the OPEB benefit is to really move as many employees that we have to this new benefit while offering a high quality and comparative to their current benefits that they have. And to do that, we want to make sure that the plan we offer is rich and comparable. We want to decrease our OPEB liability by committing dollars during active employment. As you heard tonight, lowering the retirement age is a big ticket for a lot of staff in the district and aligns the area districts. Honor staff within 5 years, which means they're 57 and have 15 years of service in the district by not changing their plans, honoring that commitment. Reducing loss ratios for insurance, which as we all know, insurance premiums continue to rise. So being able to do that long-term is in the best interest of our district and staff. And then, meeting other strategic plan goals of fiscal stability and high quality benefits to address staff compensation. So this is kind of the each different groups table here. So you can see kind of the different groups for each employee group. So for majority of them, there's 3 groups. So for teachers, you can see the top group 3 is the grandfather group within 5 years. So you can see for health insurance, there is no change for them. For sick leave, there is no change for any group. The retirement age, because they're deciding, they get to decide to stay on their current plan. There is no change to the retirement age. So that group would stay at 62 unless they decide to opt into group 2, which they'd have the option to do. And then you can see the number of employees. So there's 30 employees in that group that would have that option to opt out, right? Group 2 is kind of the staff in the middle who aren't yet 57 or 15 years, but aren't under the 6 years or more kind of thing. So they would receive the monetized amount of the health insurance at retirement, but have the ability to retire 57. For that group, there is no change to sick leave. And you can see about half, this is about half of the teachers here, 301 versus the bottom group 1, which is 276, about half, which is consistent with the slide, the bar graph that I showed in previous years, where a majority of our staff are in the 0 to 5 year window. And this shows you kind of exactly that, right? And at the bottom, you can see the retirement language at the bottom. So same idea for administration, 3 groups, right? And same kind of process and number of employees. So the majority of this group is being moved to group 1, 28 of 38 administrators there. So at will, again, same kind of process here. Group 1, you can see 47 at will employees, 47 and 57. So the far mass majority are being moved to this new plan. Maintenance and cleaners, EAs and secretarial staff, just kind of click through those. This is, to be honest, maybe probably the biggest winner of this, given that their current benefit, they have nothing. And so very glad that we've taken this up because I think they're a high valued and our schools could not work and run as efficiently as they do without each of one of those employee groups. So for them, they each receive kind of back payment for the years they've been here at the $500 a year with interest. So certainly a great benefit for them given what it has, right? So move through those. So here's only 2 groups because there's not a phased-in approach. Everyone gets the same thing. So financial analysis. So you can see here we have about 472 employees moving to a current HRA that would cost about $775,000 a year. And then with interest just under 4 million, that analysis this is at its worst. We still have to dive into each employee to figure out exactly, some of our employees that are now instructional coaches, we're a teacher, we're a secretary. And so each of their years will be honored at the rate that we are talking this evening. So This is at its worst. We certainly have been digging into the numbers, but you can imagine diving through 1,000 employees' CUME files takes time, and you can only look at a screen so long before you have to shut it down for the day, because those are mistakes that you don't want to make for people. So certainly something we'll have done here by mid to end of May, but a work in progress. But at that, this is the worst it will be. So this allows, we have $7 million. The board's committed to this project. Just under 4, it'll probably land around 3.5 to get this off the ground. And then we'll have, 7-8 years to be able to take the 7 million and keep that going. But ultimately, I don't believe it'll take $7 million to do this, because I believe that as staff in the current plans retire, we're going to see a huge decline in that amount, which we currently budget 3.5 million. So any dollar less than 3.5 million, you can take the 776,000 and that becomes supplemental. So by year 2 or 3, I could see this only costing an additional 200,000 in the budget, of which we have 3 more million in committed fund balance. So I do think in a few years, there'll be an opportunity for the board to uncommit those dollars to a different priority. So I talked initially that this might take 5, 6, 7, 8 years for staff to start seeing like, hey, here are the dollars left. That might take less, which is good news. And we have a chunk of money to be able to start to supplement that initially. So that's good opportunity. So recommendations, so there's 5. I'll just go through them briefly. So number 1 is who would be moving to the defined contribution HRA. So teachers under 6 years, at wills and admin under 16, all facilities and cleaners, EAs and secretaries under the current phase. And then the bottom is the vesting schedule that we had discussed at the last meeting, being the formal recommendation this evening at 5 years, 20%, 10 years, 40%, 15 years, 60, 20 years, 80, and 100% retirement. And as I mentioned before, I do think as a part of any good organization, continuous improvement is revisiting these things, and revisiting them in terms of what were the priorities, what were the goals, are we meeting those goals, are we seeing outcomes that we want? And so I think this is a great thing to bring up again, that does not need to be set in stone. It is something the board should revisit maybe every year, maybe every few years, and have a discussion. Because what's best for one isn't what's best for all. And as we've talked about with student discipline this evening, our schools are changing and evolving, and us doing the same is likely what's best for our community and staff. So number 2, this speaks to the grandfathering in of staff who are 57 with 15. I made a note, this does not impact staff who received the early retirement notification last February. They're entitled to that benefit should they retire by June of 24. That's not this June, but the following June. Should they not, they would be subject to their group in this plan, right? And then any EA or secretary in phase 1 and 2 would remain the current plan. Recommendation 3 is staff in the middle. So teachers with 6+ years who are not 57 and 15, the admin and at will, or 16+ years who have not met 15 and 15 would receive at retirement the monetized amount of the health insurance benefit, right? So that group would receive guaranteed increases in health insurance. So if we get an 8% increase, which we won't this year, but if we do in future years, their benefit just got 8% higher, right? So this group, to be honest, has the most protection against inflation at a time where inflation's as high as it's ever been. So just to make a reference to that. And then recommendation 4 is the formal recommendation to reduce the retirement age for all employee groups to 57. And the last recommendation, as I mentioned before, would be to allow employees who retire from our district to use the wellness clinic, which would be opening by freighter here soon, until they reach Medicare eligibility, which currently they are able to do only because they're on district insurance. And so we think it's a nice token to staff to be able to say, we know that when you retire, you're going to be entering a new world of finding your own insurance. We understand that. We have supports through Ken's organization to help with that, where they can meet with the consultant to work out what that plan is. And I just want to say this to get into the weeds a bit, not too deep, is that we currently offer a very broad network, high cost plan to staff for us. We pay a high cost. And what I mean by that is if someone has 20 kids, it covers all 20 kids. That is not the case when someone reaches retirement. It's usually themselves and then, a +1 significant other. And so each person has their own needs. I'm sure each one of you maybe has a preferred doctor, and you maybe only use Aurora, or you only use Freighter, or I don't really go out of the country, or I don't, things like that. So when you start to narrow the scope, the insurance you'll find becomes less expensive. And given that, pre-existing conditions are not a thing anymore in terms of getting qualification. I do believe that people will be surprised when they go to get coverage to see how far the dollars they receive go, because we aren't able to individualize insurance for the 25-year-old that's single who has no insurance, doesn't really need it, right? They think, right? Versus someone who's 60 and has 5 kids and has higher needs. So we have a plan that works for everybody, which comes at a higher price, right? So just making a reference to that.
Did you share that with staff at all?
Yeah, we
Did you say that? Okay, good. I'm glad. I need them to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if any of you receive questions, I feel like we're over communicating at this point, but I think over communicating is better than under communicating. But if you certainly get any questions about that, please direct them to me. Happy to take questions and to have one-on-one conversations. To date, I haven't logged them, but I'm at about 40 or 50 individual calls, and it's a 5-minute call that brings a lot of peace of mind to people, because this is a big deal. And people that are getting close, even within 10 years, this is the thing they want to talk about, and they have a right to know about this. And I think that's one thing, if anything, I've learned from this journey, I'd call it at this point, a year long, is we need to do a better job of getting in front of people during their work time to talk about this. FMLA, short-term benefits, WRS, things like that. I think this is important. I think we need to sell to all teachers, not just our district. Like, what are the benefits of being educated in this state? And that is different here than other districts, but certainly we have a lot to talk about. That's really good. So I intend to do that and carry that forward. So with that, only 21 slides. So I will stop and take questions.
So before we have questions, I just want to say, I know we joke about the length of slides you provided us. However,
Because we work at a high level.
it's important, and especially when we're talking about this. So although we kid, it's important to have 65 slides. So number one, we can go through each one of those processes and understand as a board. And so then staff can also understand themselves. If they don't understand something, they can then ask. So having the detail there is incredibly important. So I know we joke, but thank you for taking it to that level so that all of us can hopefully feel more confident about the process that we have in front of us. So thank you. So questions.
Just thank you so much for having educational assistants, secretaries, custodians, because they run our buildings. Like, as a teacher, I can never function without those folks. And I think providing this is just an amazing gift that we can do.
Mr. Sikich.
No, that's all right.
I'm sorry.
I said, that's all right.
Oh, okay.
If people are just going to start talking when you ask for questions and people raise their hand and other ones talk, I have no comment.
Other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Sikich.
That did bring up a question for me. What about the recommendations?
Oh,
Is that part of the whole? I mean, how do we do 5 recommendations if we pass this?
I had it built in as one recommendation, the whole thing. So we'd approve all 5 at one time.
Okay,
I certainly could build them on if you prefer, but that's fine.
so what, a teacher would have their choice on
Oh, no.
1 to 2 or?
I get what your question is. So each employee, I'll go back here a bit. It's a good question, Mr. Sikich. So each employee here in this table fits in a certain category, right? So like a group 3 in the teacher proposal is for staff who are currently 57 and have 15 years of service by June 30th. So that group of staff, there's 30 of them, are grandfathered into their proposal, which means they currently have health insurance at retirement at 62. So that the plan defines who fits where.
Got it. I just wasn't sure that we're approving 5 plans and how they're going to be distributed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
Thank
And then
you.
certainly if the board decides to approve this, then, we take that into our hands and start communicating that to people and where they fit and, figuring out, I guess, efficient ways to do that with 1,000 employees. But we do have communication drafted in draft form, and then your vote tonight to send out tomorrow, even though it's break, and then again after break, and then the notification window for retirement is April 10th. And so given the proximity to spring break and the vote, we thought moving that back a week made sense. It's now the 17th, and then we'll offer scheduled time for staff with questions to make an appointment with us, or we'll be in the schools, things like that, to have additional assistance, because sometimes it's just like 10-second question they gotta have answered. It's just like, you know, you're walking in, I got a question. It's like easier if someone's there. So, yeah.
Any other questions? I did have a comment, so before we take action on it, but I didn't want to make sure everyone had an opportunity, and actually forgot about Joe. Mr. Becker, is there any? No, okay, all right. It's minimized, so I can't see them. I just want to say, this is, you've been working on this a year, but I remember when I first came on the board, we were looking at finances and all the things that we had to look at, and the things that people didn't like. And one was the compensation plan that was in place as far as the performance compensation that staff had. We heard was not popular. And then the second thing that Dr. Lexman was saying is we need to address OPEB, because long-term is just not going to be viable. So it's something that's been on my radar the 6 years that I've been on this board. And it's taken all of that time to get a compensation model in place and changed. And then now we're at this next step. So I'm very thankful that we've gotten this far, because I do know that I'll be long gone off this board by the time the financial benefits of this district are being seen. And I think it's so important to denote that, because the dollars that we're saving here can go right back into the classroom, and hopefully staff compensation is a big part of that, so that we can continue to have a good retirement benefit, but also be able to increase that percentile that we are in their state for what we are able to pay our salary of our staff. And then the most important thing that I will want to see going forward from this is looking at those retention rates in that 0 to 5 range. Do we see an increase? Because as you said, it should be an ongoing evaluation thing, right? We had these benefits for however many years, but we saw this very up and down and recently increase in how many staff we're losing every year. And so we're trying to do things that will fix that, will reduce it, or at least plateau it, so that we can hopefully have a consistency with our staff, with our students, which we know is very important for achievement. So I think that those are all very important things to note here, and something that I'm looking forward to seeing what the outcomes as we move into this process and move, several years down the road to see, are we seeing that retainment? If not, let's survey the staff to find out why not. And if there's additional tweaks we can do here, whether it's tweaks to when the vesting structure happens, if that would get more people to stay for that extra time frame, or whatever. And also, revisiting the year's payout that has been brought up a number of times by staff. Something that was in the past went away with Act 10, I believe, and has been discussed as another possibility. And I think we should look into that and say, what is going to be the right benefit to encourage that longevity here in our district. So,
and I think you made me think of this, but I think a good thing to think about, and I think about our association and certainly the board here, is leadership is when is making a decision you have nothing to gain from.
Right.
And our association, many of them, I shouldn't speak for all of them, many of them are involved in the early retirement package. They have nothing to gain by this, but they're there leading and working with staff, just like you are, is taking this on. Certainly this will have much more of a financial impact in 15 years than it will tomorrow. And assumingly that I won't be here in 25 years, and I'm sure you guys won't. So it's like, this is the decision that predates all of us, right? So, yeah, certainly I agree with that wholeheartedly. So that's what this is.
Okay, so anything else? We have a motion and a second, I believe. Right? Okay. All right. Anything else? Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, and Joe's a big thumbs up. It's so large. That passes. Thank you so much. And we'll move on to our last action item for this evening, 10.7, resolution authorizing the establishment of Fund 73 OPEB Trust. Mr. Norris.
So this is just an extension of our last conversation on OPEB. So the establishment of the trust is really similar to the Fund 46 that we have, and Mr. Eichmann's here this evening. I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit too. But the Fund 73 trust is an allowable trust that it's legally can be opened through the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. It's meant and it's established for the creation of retirement benefits for staff. And to me, it provides transparency for staff. So one of the comments you heard this evening to allow staff to have kind of the the trust that these dollars can't be accessed and touched regardless of who is sitting here or who's the administration, the superintendent, or the school board. So, you know, the WRS system is in a trust. That's a great example of what we're looking to establish. So I think having this has benefits for staff. There's also benefits for the district in terms of fiscal stability, and that in a surplus year, which we've had sometimes, you can decide to put those dollars into a trust, which then can prepay for these benefits, and they're considered share cost eligible, which then decreases the tax levy and increases our share costs for the district. So a number of benefits, but to be honest, I think it's something that I'd strongly recommend if we're going to go down the road, which we now have approved to do. So with that, I would take any questions.
Any questions about the trust? It's kind of a key component of the thing we just passed, so I really hope you don't have a lot of concerns with it. We should discuss that before.
Motion to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded, and one comment, this is the irrevocable piece of that is the fact that it's in a trust. So not something that we can be, that the district, the board, administration can decide, no, we're gonna take that money and put it somewhere else. It's in the, once that money goes in the trust, the only way it comes out is in paying these benefits. Is that correct?
An allowable expense, which would be that benefit. Yeah.
Okay, allowable expense, great. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Becker is a thumbs up as well, and that passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
that ends our action items for this evening. Do we want to take a 5-minute recess before the workshop?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess and we'll come back for our workshop. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. So we'll move on to our workshop this evening, financial stability. Actually, we have 3 of them. 11.1 facility and grounds overview with Mr. Eichmann. Welcome.
Thank you. So as you can see from the title slide, it's facilities and operations, our annual spring update. Because a few board meetings back when we did this, we said that we would come, make a commitment to come in the spring and come in the fall. Maybe not the same month in the spring or the fall, but we would come back twice a year to kind of give you an update of, give you an update of where we're at.
Mhm.
So here's the agenda of what we'll be going through. And then the rationale for facilities management. And again, you've seen this, I believe, in the past, but it's a lot easier and a lot more efficient if we can have the staff internally on staff, like master electricians and HVAC technicians and all of that, to have them to make sure that not only are we not paying trip charges and all that, but we don't have to worry about when we get on their schedule to get here. So it is beneficial to us to do that. And then how are projects prioritized? It's safety and security, and then mandated or regulatory requirements, congruency with facilities master plan, and then the scheduled replacement. But also one of the main ones is the asset condition, the annual recurring costs, and the asset longevity. And what that really means is the useful life. And then when I get into the district office relocation, I'll talk to you about how that comes into play and how it's really important that we pay attention to, to all of these things. And other things, it's just sometimes something breaks that we absolutely have to get it repaired, whether we had planned for it or not, or we may have planned for it, but maybe it was out a year or two, but something happened and we just have to take care of it right away. And then what we do is we just switch with something else that's not as important, put it in a different year. And then you've seen these slides before from last time, but what I did is the items that are up there that are not highlighted were the items that were completed at the fall update. And now the items that you see in the highlighted in the green, those are the items that have been completed since that time. So I'm not going to go over all of these, but I just wanted to make sure you understood what the highlighting was for. And there's like 4 or 5 slides that talk about all this, and you can see it's a wide variety of different items, and it's at all the schools. And then we'll get to the projects that have been requested and or scheduled for 23-24. Some of the items like roofing, for example, because there's still supply chain issues, and also with trying to get labor, get on their schedules and that. Typically, in the past, we had gone for roofing, we'd gone out for bid in January or February. This year, we did it after Thanksgiving. So we've been on their schedules since the first part of January. Just because not only did we want to get on their schedule to actually do the work, but we wanted to make sure that we had all the materials in place as well. Yeah, so some of Norris said, maybe talk about some of the items that we worked on. And a prime example, if you look on this page here, the first one that's highlighted in green was the sinkhole repair at Irving. We did get insurance money back from that, but that was one of those things that it happened. We had to deal with it. And it was quite involved because the water came up so high that it got into the venting. And so we had to make sure that we had everything all cleaned and all that. So there's some things like that we have to do. There's, we've done some concrete repair, a lot of concrete repair, door installation, video camera installation. One of the projects that we're working on right now that we plan on having completed by the middle or end of June is that all of the high schools on all of the exterior doors, we're installing security cameras. In addition, what we're doing is we're installing, it's not really an alarm, but it's an alert. So that if the door between certain times, we can set up the parameter of the times. If the door is open during that time, it sends an alert to the office. And it says door N4 or whatever it is open. But then we also have not only do we know it's open, and we have the security camera then to be able to look and see who is there or who opened it. And then we can take steps based on, was it a staff member that, maybe they felt it was too warm or something and they opened it, whatever it may be, or students, and then we can deal with it. And then next year, our goal is to work on the 2 intermediate schools and do the same thing there. So when we're done, all of our secondary schools, every external entrance will have a security camera. And on the ones that aren't the main entrances, there will also be an alert as to when that door is open within that predetermined times. Yeah.
Can I just go back one slide to the communication boxes at Hale? What is a communication box?
If you ever go to the soccer fields or the football fields and on the ground, you'd see a little square green cover.
Yeah.
What there's usually internet in there. There's electrical in there. And there may be some other. And so what we did, because we moved the jump kits on the outside, what we did, so we had some out there, but then we also, where the 2 blacktop drives, I guess, come in the one end of the stadium, we put some there as well, because in talking with the athletic directors and some of the parents, they said that, they have to take cash, or if they're doing something with the card, they have to do it on their phone and it takes a long time. So now we'll have internet out there. We'll have a table there, so they'll be able to do it more efficiently and more effectively as well.
Thank you.
And we just thought this was the time to do it while that thing's tore up as well, is to put those communication boxes in.
A lot of times you see them in basketball courts on the edge near where the score table is, where they can plug them in. That kind of same idea. Sure. Good.
One of the things we did too is there had been some talk about updating the scoreboard and moving it from the end where it's at to the opposite end, and then having video capability and all that. But with everything else, it's a lot of money. It's about, with all of that, it's over $200,000. But what we did is we looked at where they were proposing to put it in, and we have a communication box there as well. So that if it doesn't happen, the communication box is there. If it does happen, now we have it. We don't have to retrench or do anything else to get the necessary electrical data, whatever it is there.
Thanks, Steve.
And I just want to say, when we were working, there was the fundraising for the Hale Central football game. And the line was from the fence all the way out to the parking lot. And I remember sitting there like, why is it so long? And it's that reason. And so I'm very happy to hear that we now have the ability to have a computer there, take electronic payments, credit cards, whatever, so that can be faster. Is it on both of the entrances, or is it just on the one side?
Just on the one side.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping that'll be helpful. So I'm glad to hear
It's on the one end of the field, but it's actually on both sides of
right.
that.
Oh, so you have it. So okay, so both.
Yes.
Great, that's good, that's good, yeah.
And then some of the projects you can see coming up that, and the reason we have for tentative dates of work is to be determined. Because we're still going through and trying to, price out what all of these might be. And then we're looking at some of the requests that the schools that, obviously at the schools that are being consolidated, we're not going to be looking at doing capital projects there, but the schools that those students are going to, with the influx of students, there's some things that the principals have requested. Some of it is like putting double doors in between two classrooms, where with the number of students they had currently, they didn't see it necessarily as a high priority item. Now with having more students there and using more of the classrooms, that's something that they've asked for. So it's a balancing act of trying to look at, what do we need to do to be compliant? What do we need to do for safety? But then also what do we need to do to make sure that our students and our staff are served as efficiently as they can be as well. And then there's some door replacements, some asphalt patching. Again, there's fence replacement. We have to look at replacing the fire alarms at West Milwaukee and Hale, because the current systems that we have, they're at the end of their useful life, and it's difficult, if at all, to find parts. So sometimes we have to go to other districts and see if they have spare parts that may have the same system. And that between those two schools, the one quote that I have right now, between those two schools, it's about $250,000 to replace the entire fire alarm system at those sites.
Oh my God.
Actually cheaper than I thought.
So that's what I mean, where it's difficult to plan sometimes because those things come up. We try to repair them as long as we can, but sometimes when those things are, 30, 40 years old, the manufacturers either aren't in business anymore or they've moved on from that make or model so long ago, they don't have any spare parts anymore.
Right.
And then again, we replaced the boiler, we'll replace the rear door boiler door at Mitchell, basement wall repairs, again, fencing repairs. One of the sites wanted to have privacy slats in the fence because the neighbors were complaining that the students were out at the playground, and then what it was doing is it was bothering their dogs. So the easiest way around that is, we're looking at if we put privacy slats in there, so it cuts down on the.
It's on the list. It's not.
It's not, you can see it, that's to be determined, so.
I wonder how much, because that's for one,
It's on the list.
for one person.
But those are the type of things that we get all the time from the site, so.
Everything goes in the list and then.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can see on this page that the top two items are in process, and that's that door alert installation and the security camera installation. The roofing we talked about, that's gonna start once school is out. And then you can see some of the different, the ceiling repair, replacement, flooring replacement, security camera installation. Excuse me. Some of that is we still have some analog cameras at some of the buildings. So we're trying to pick, 5 or 10 each year to try and get those up to digital. And if it's appropriate, not only digital, but then also the panoramic, like if it's on the corner of a building. So that we have the ability then to cover more area than if we just have the stationary analog camera. And then asbestos abatement. That's really determined by project. If we're gonna, if a floor, we have to replace the floor, we have to have them come and look at it and see, is there asbestos? If there is, we'll replace it. And sometimes it shows up in places that you wouldn't think, like, for example, when we were putting in the exterior freezer at Hale, we had to cut out the supply room wall to go into where the door for the new freezer was. The wall itself is concrete block, and it was fine, but the glazing on the block had asbestos in it. So we had, so it's, and then we'll have, if we have a pipe that leaks, it's a water feed for the boiler. Well, the insulation around the pipe has asbestos, so we have to have somebody come in and do that. That's also why sometimes, repairs are scheduled, but they don't get done as quickly as we'd like, because we're at the, the mercy of when can the asbestos abatement company get here to do that.
Have we looked in starting our own asbestos abatement company? I think like a lot, and maybe it could be a revenue generator for the district.
Yeah,
as well.
it's amazing how many places it is, and almost any floor that you see that has 9-inch tile,
Mhm.
either the tile and or the mastic undoubtedly has asbestos in it. And it's okay while it's not, if it's not friable,
Yeah.
it's fine. But as soon as it breaks or starts coming up or something, that's when we have to look at, we need to get that repaired. And then the Docky Kitchen remodel update. I know this is difficult to see, but I've been doing some of this in the, I think the board update that Mr. Norris puts out every week. I've been trying to keep you apprised of where we're at with that. And so this is you can see where we have the layout of where the different items will go. I know this is very difficult to read, but the revised timeline right now is that they're saying that they will be done with everything by the 21st of May. So our goal has been all along to make sure that we're done by the start of school in the fall of 24. The other, if you look at that blue line up towards the top, that goes all the way from the start and it goes all the way out to almost April. What that is that's the HVAC items, the procurement. So when we ordered it, it was on a 34-week out. And now that has grown, not for this particular unit, because we ordered it then, but some of the other units now are 40 to 46 weeks out. If you ordered it. And so, so we need to order it now. So hopefully, for example, if we ordered it now, you'd probably have it by the end of January next year.
So anticipate your HVAC needs early.
And and when we get to the relocation, we'll talk about that, but that's one of the things that we really pushed was on the HVAC scope of work and everything, so we could get that ordered. Because there again, that is, the lead time on that is quite substantial. We're gonna, right now, we're gonna be okay. It'll be pushing it, but we'll be okay. Because we can get everything else in place prior to that arriving. And then I won't spend a lot of time on these pictures because I believe most of these pictures you have seen before in the update. But you can see that, we had this floor that was in there before and you can kind of see what we had. And now you can see the new wall, the studding was there. And then some of the new HVAC that's going in. And then we're having new exhaust as well. And that's being run from units that are up on the roof. And that's the update.
I have so many questions, but what do you guys have? Questions are good. Sometimes we just want you to go first.
Right.
This is so great stuff. I mean, this is awesome. Thank you, first and foremost. Thank you for doing this. I know when I first started on the board, we didn't have these sorts of things and we would kind of hear about stuff that needed to be done or should be done, and we didn't really know what was done. And so this is nice to see, first and foremost. And also thank you for being able to know how to plan so far in advance so that we don't end up in a situation like, well, we have a project that's done except for this thing that is now another 2 months out because, we didn't realize we needed to get it so early. So thank you for you and your team for, staying on top of it. First and foremost, something has been said recently about the reason our building is in such bad shape is because of our deferred maintenance. So maintenance that we knew we needed to do, but didn't do. So in your opinion, the repairs, the things that need to be done in our building, is that because of negligence or because of things reaching their end of life and not being able to wholesale replace them because of budgetary concerns? So what's your opinion?
I think it's a couple of things. I think one is that, but first and foremost, I think it is that most things are at the end of their useful life. And some of them are way past their useful life. And the other is that, even with the things that are at the end of their useful life, we have to prioritize which ones we're going to do because, as you remember, we had $239 million worth of CIP projects. And even at $1.5 million or $2 million a year, we're not going to get to all of them. It's just impossible to do that. But we're doing that. I believe we're doing the best that we can with the money that we have and the circumstances with the lead time and all of that. I think we have a really talented group of individuals that work hard and take pride in what they do to make sure that these, I think it's a sense of pride for them that some of these items are still lasting and working as long as they have been. When we get to the next one, we'll talk about something that has a 25-year useful life, but when that 25 years was up, and we're still using it.
It's a good story. You guys will like it.
But, you know, and so I think a lot of times, you know, and I've been doing this long enough that a lot of times, you know, people, that's what you like, if you go for a referendum, doesn't matter what state, what district you're in. It's like, well, if you took care of what you had, you wouldn't have to do this. I don't believe that's the case here at all. I believe, I mean, and if you remember back to the report, the architects and the construction managers said the same thing. It's just the systems are old. It's not that they haven't been taken care of. I mean, we have routine maintenance, preventative maintenance that we do every year with them. It's just certain things can only last so long. And it just gets to a point, like I used the analogy before, I think about a vehicle. At some point, you just have to say, is it more cost effective to just bite the bullet and get something new, or to continue to put in, you know, 1,000 here, 10,000 here, and do it that way. But there again, you know, looking at prioritizing that in the whole context of the entire district.
And just to speak to the finance part of that, I mean, it's a good question you ask, Noah, but you know, in terms of our budget each year for Steve's projects, in terms of the rest of the state, so what Baird does is they provide analysis on percent of total budget over this object, right? And so you can break it down and see, like, that's how I got the OPEB's data on the salary stuff. We're in the 88th, 89th percentile in what we budget for Steve's staff to do these projects. It's just the facts. We have old buildings. And if you go to suburban districts, they might not have buildings from the 1920s, 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
So to keep those up requires a larger part of our budget, which then has other impacts on different areas. And so I would not say in my time working in this district that there's been a lack of financial commitment or from the Steve's department and a lack of effort to get these things done. It's just a reality of where we're at. And so trying to balance those priorities is just the challenge, right?
And I just want to understand what you said, 88th, 39th percentile of the districts in the state for how much
Correct.
money we actually commit to.
Of the total
CIP
revenue we
projects, of our
receive.
total revenue that we
Yep.
get, we're in the 88th or 89th.
Yeah, I
percentile.
can get the actual number, but the last time I checked, it was in the high 80s.
So I've never heard that before, and I think that that's really important to know, just because a lot of times we're castigated for not taking care of the stuff that we have. But to know that we're actually in the, you know, top third, or better than that, almost top 10% of the districts in the state for budgeting to try to keep. But as you said, if we had newer buildings, then maybe we actually could put more money towards educating students instead of taking care of old buildings. And nothing against the work your team does, Steve. Obviously, you make, I think, $1 go to 10 most times, but I think that it's an important thing to note, especially for the public to know too, because I've never heard that before. I don't know if anyone else had known that, but I did not know that. So that's great. That's great to hear. There's one public comment about central doors being able to sneak into. And my understanding is during the school day, all doors are secured except for the door. I mean, all doors are secured, but you have to go in through specific doors that you're buzzed into. The back door that's on off, was it Grant there? There's no access to that unless someone would physically open it from the inside. Is
Right.
that correct?
There are some doors that on the outside, there's just a flat piece of metal. There is no handle, there is no key, there's no prox card. So if somebody is coming in that way, it's because the door has not been shut properly or somebody's propped it open.
Okay, and now we will have alarms or notifications as well as security cameras at those entrances. So that if that is something that's occurring, the staff in the office would be able to be aware of that and then take action if necessary.
Yes, and then in conjunction with the camera, we'll be able to see what happened to cause that door to be open to as well.
Very good. Okay. All right. With the new kitchen, and this might be more of a question for Deidre. I don't know if she's still on or not. Has there any discussions or any thoughts about trying to partner with METC to work with classes to make use of this space and make more opportunities for our students? I know we maybe already do some of that, but I don't know if it's with this new kitchen that we're putting in at Dot Key, if that's something that has been considered or discussed at all.
I can answer that. I'm still on.
She's on a walk. I'm bothering her. Can you switch the audio
I
over,
can
please,
answer it.
Brandon?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We should be able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yep. So yes, the answer to that one is a simple one. It's yes. We are partnering with MATC to be able to offer the culinary certificate. We can't yet loan it out to MATC to use, but that is definitely part of the further partnership. Some of the challenge with offering the culinary program was just we couldn't get the kids to the program. It was taking too much of their school day. So whether or not we'll be able to MATC to use some of that facility on off times when we are not using it for the culinary program is something that Steve Carr and I are exploring with them.
Last question that I had, just came off of, having master electricians, plumbers and stuff like that on staff, so we're not paying trip charges. When we need work to be done and we don't have to be at the whims of their schedules to get things accomplished. I don't know if this is possible or not, but has there been ever thought about trying to provide students in our district an opportunity to shadow some of those individuals when they're doing work in our district to give them experience from a professional standpoint or just like, I don't know if I want to do this or not standpoint. I'd love to see what's involved with it without having to do, go through official apprenticeship program or something like that through one of the local unions. I don't know, maybe it's impossible to do, but just something I thought of.
I haven't been approached about anything like that, but it's a good idea. It's something that I'd have to work with Deidre and then, to see what would that be involved and Steve Carr and to see what would that look like and then what would the logistics of all it be. But yeah, that's something. I mean, I know that our staff would love to share the knowledge that they have.
Yeah.
Because the majority of them have been doing it for a while as well. And I think that's important to them to be able to pass that knowledge on.
And I know some districts, I've heard of this before, is they offer what's called like an apprenticeship 101. And so it's kind of a semester or a year long. It depends on the district and kind of the strategy, but they'll have, a local, union plumber, a master plumber come in for 2 weeks and they run kind of a seminar and then a welder comes in and things like that. It's kind of an interesting idea to maybe get at what you're asking about. So I think those are some options. I have to ask Steve. He initially did talk to me about something like that, but I'm not sure. I think it's challenging to coordinate all of that. You know what I mean? Someone that's available, but yeah.
I think there's a lot of students in our district who are interested in those opportunities. And so having something like an apprentice 101, I hadn't heard about that before. I think that would be a great thing to explore. We have plenty of, skilled trades unions in the area that I think we'd be able to reach out to try to see if there was interested individuals. And I was just feeling like, well, if we have people in-house and they're doing work in our district, it's the traveling becomes less of an issue. And I know everyone may not want to work with a student. They just want to do their job. And I understand that too, but just trying to think of opportunities that we have that would be minimal to zero cost, but might be able to provide someone who's like, I don't know, I heard this might be fun, but I don't know if I want to commit a bunch of time to it if I don't really know.
Right.
And to give someone an opportunity to kind of learn about it, I think it'd be great. So whether it's both those things or one of those things, but just something I wanted to bring up, because if we have skilled trades people employed by the district already now, but they're not teaching staff, if they're fixing something in the district, that's hands-on experience and the ability to kind of see how that works, I think would be great. That's all the questions that I had. So opening it up for the rest of the board here. Or Mr. Becker. Mr. Becker's good. Everyone else? Good. Okay, well, simple enough. Thank you so much for the update.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Very much appreciate that. On to the next one.
And the next thing is Steve.
And the next, and then or Steve. 11.2. Future district office update with Mr. Norris and Mr. Eichmann. And if anyone doesn't want this update, I actually requested it because after we had passed it, we hadn't really heard much of it. And I was hoping to get just an idea of where we are with the process. And since there was some funds that we committed to it, so I want to make sure that we kind of have a good idea of how things are progressing. Thanks.
No, so thank you. And so what I did on this is I put in what the floor plan looks like. You've seen that before, but Aaron is also handing out some, they're a little easier to read, 11 by 17. And then here's the agenda of what we go through with all of this. You know, and you've seen some of this before when we talked to the board before. And the rationale was that when we sold these buildings, we entered into a 5-year lease, and the end of that lease is coming up next year, about a year from now. And so we looked at right sizing the district office. And I want to point out that here where it says right sizing the district office, the current leasing is the 24,332. But the next one where it says proposed space, that and the next two numbers with the square feet of the addition and the remodeling renovation, those are slightly higher than they were when we initially came to the board. And I'll explain why as we go further along here. The cost of the project is still what was approved. We're still on budget. It hasn't increased, but I'll explain why we did this and then what we did to make this work. So as you know, that the funding is coming from Fund 49 from the sale of 1205 and then 1135, 1139 South 70th. And then we talked about, you know, we don't have exact numbers, but just what tends to happen when you do a lease extension, it's tends to be more expensive than what you're currently under. Excuse me. Talked before about Bray and CG Schmidt are the partners that we're working with. And then the initial recommendation, as you remember, was they added addition above the existing single-story building at 9333. And then it would include some of the CPI costs for 9333 as well. You remember, this is what the initial addition looked like, the configuration of it. And it went over the loading dock a little bit. And then up, we were going to extend the canopy up by where the entrance to the wellness center is as well. And that's the little red part over on the bottom left-hand side. And then this is just you know, kind of where we looked at how the rooms might be laid out there. And then this is what the lower level was like. We went through the CPI or CIP costs before. And then the revised plan, you can see that the configuration of the addition is a little different now than what it was before. The reason for this is that as we were going through and we were working with the architects and with the executive team and working with others, we decided that this would be a more conducive to the day-to-day operations of not only the leadership and learning area, but also the rest of the building as well. And so what we did is by not having to build a walkway and extend out over the loading dock that was there, and then not doing anything with the canopy out front, because we'd be able to use that existing door that goes into you go into a vestibule, and then you can right now you can go into the wellness center, or there's a door that would go into the will be the remodeled district office. Well, when we're all done with all of this, that really will be just used for an egress from the district office, because there won't be any parking out there. And so there'll be other doors where it's a lot more efficient for people to park and come in. And so by doing that and not having to build out over there, and then we also changed the concrete ramp to be ADA compliant. We changed that a little bit as well. And so with the savings from not having to do those three things, we were able to increase the size of the addition to get where we're at now, but it did not raise the overall cost of the project.
And so when you look at the screen or on your page 2, above scope of work, that's Lincoln Avenue, right? And so the gray is the wellness clinic. And so just to give you some reference there, page 3 is kind of the updated current plans where we're at. Still a work in progress, but this is kind of just a general update. Do you have something on page 2?
What room 110, is that gonna be intended for like the boardroom or?
It I can't see it.
So 110 is currently the leadership and learning workroom. So instead of offices, the department operates in kind of a flex space.
Oh,
And that's kind of that room right there. So under this proposal, there's no space for a boardroom. here.
Right, I just want to double check. I
Yeah,
understood that.
that's a good question. Yeah.
We would have two conference rooms. There'd be the superintendent's conference room and then the right next to the leadership and learning workroom. That's another conference room as well.
Yeah.
And part of what drove this as well is that with the entrance for the public being where it is up at the top there. What we did is you can see that when we come in that hallway and then you go to looking at this, you go to the right to enter into the leadership and learning or the new addition. There's a door there. It'll have a Prox card reader on it. And there's one right by the bottom of that L where you come in as well. So it'll be not unlike it is now where somebody can come in the main entrance during our normal hours. They can come up to the reception area or they can go into the enrollment center and that's it. They can't go anywhere else without having a Prox card or without somebody buzzing them in after they state their purpose and who they are and why they're here. And then once you get into the leadership and learning again, at the end of that hallway, there's another Prox card reader there. And then there's a tech classroom that's there, that big square there. And so once they come in and they get buzzed in, they can go into that classroom. And with the exception of going all the way across the room, they really are in that room and that's where they stay.
Like from a security perspective, they enter, they're buzzed in that space. There's a bathroom, there's their classroom. There's access to kind of, to be able to flex in and out, but then they can't wander through. The student couldn't wander through the whole office.
There isn't any way, for them to go out. There isn't any need for them, I should say, to go back outside once they've come in. Because everything they have is in that, either in the classroom or right next to it is a restroom for them as well.
I know that page 3 is more engaging with what's happening, but page 2, I didn't want to point to that. If you can click back, see the second, the lower level. So one of the things is, leaving this space to go there, right? We have less storage now, right? So the lower level, there's not as much changing, right? Obviously, it's not as much color, but the one thing I want to point out is the L&L work storage room. So this has kind of been kind of a baby of Steve's in mine, is to create kind of a systematic approach to how we, onboard materials and then, unload them, put them into our data software, or data management system, and then store them before they're distributed to schools. So you can see where at the top where it says loading dock at the very top of that page. And then there's in lighter gray, it's a storage. And then there's just 2 doors that enter in the blue area called the L&L storage workroom area, right? So that's kind of where the forklift drops materials off. The 2 doors are large enough for a forklift could drop off a pallet. Then picture like an island where things would be unloaded, inventoried, and then the back half of that room, you see the little dashes on the corners. That's where they get stored by school. And then there's a at the south part of that, there's another door where you could take them onto another pallet or a forklift to be distributed to a truck. That's kind of the system we're thinking of, because obviously we have way more square footage than we need, but there is still a method to the madness a bit, right? To be able to efficiently get something in and get it distributed. Plus, where this storage area is, it's currently there's salt pallets, things like that. We don't want technology sitting there. I mean, it's just not kind of the environment you want with things like that. So that was in addition to the plan that I felt was necessary, given if you've ever walked through there. It's just Steve's team operates the wood shop there. We do a lot of in-house projects. That's just a nice clean area where things can be stored. So
Sometimes depending on what it's getting, we may get 10 or 12 pallets at a time.
Yeah.
And now they just kind of sit wherever they may, we can find room for them. Now we would have some place where we could go and we could put them. So not only are they away from the sawdust and, some of that, they're also in a secured area as well. So it just helps on a couple of fronts by doing that. Because right now that space is there. It's not going to be new space. It's going to be redesigned a little bit, but it's really underutilized right now.
And it wasn't a huge cost. There was a non-load bearing wall that'll get taken out and some new storage. So it's not something that was substantial and increase, but I think something that'll be really helpful. So, yeah. Good. I keep going.
Okay, and here's the district office, the updated timeline, and it really hasn't changed from when we first started. So if we do need to, depending on how the schedule goes, ideally, we'd like to have everything done by the end of March or the end of February next year. But we talked about, depending on how the addition goes, that we may have to do a transitional plan where we can move into the remodeled area, and then leadership and learning for a few months may need to work out of buildings or something like that. But they're hoping that they can get everything done by February 1st, but the remodeled area where the majority of everything other than leadership and learning would go, they're still seeing that being able to be completed by February 1st of next year.
Okay.
And then the budget, I know that's what a lot of people are, wondering about with the budget. You can see they're up at the top on the right where it says project area breakdown. You can see the amount of square footage of the addition, the renovation, the site work. And then you can see we have it broken down into group codes, like 10 is addition, 20 is renovation, 30 is site work. And then it has the unit price per square foot in that. Comes out to the $6,002,958. Then we have soft costs, and then the total project budget is still the $7,830,756. So like I said, with doing some, we went through a lot of iterations to get to where we're at. And then it's like, okay, well, that's all well and good. What do we have to do to make sure that we stay within budget? And so there were some minor concessions that we made, but I think overall, the overall plan is better and more conducive to the day-to-day operations than it was. And then this is something that we use for every change that we have. It's a cost control log. And so we look at that and we say, okay, if we're going to do this, it costs this much. But then it's going to put us this much over. So if we do that, what are we going to do to make sure that we stay back within budget? One of the things that we did a couple of weeks ago is with the architects, and then depending on what the trade was, I had my guys sit in on the interviews for the MEP contractors. So we did plumbing, we did electrical, we did fire protection, and we did HVAC. And so I had my tradesmen sit in, since they're the ones who will be dealing with all of this after it's in. And we went through, I think in the course of that week, we had 14 different interviews with different contractors. And then we met later in the week, we went over, said, okay, is there anything that we need to add, any clarifications we need to make to them before they give us their budgets and all of that? They did. And when we got all 4 of those trades back, from what we had budgeted originally, we were $54,000 over what we had budgeted as all 4 of those contracted areas. So that came out of the contingency that we have. So we still have a little over right now, a little over $900,000 in the owner and the construction contingencies. So we're still in talking with the architects and CG Schmidt. I said, well, 54,000 over for me seems like that's pretty good, because we're talking almost $1 million for those MEPs. And they said that they just did a couple recently, and they're projects that are similar in size, and they were over $100,000, well over $100,000 over on each of those. But I think it's because we sat down with them when we were doing the scope, because, on that slide before, you'd see it said code 10. Well, that's just a number there. Excuse me, but in my office, I'll have 12 pages of all the details of what goes into that. And so we'd go through line item by line item and saying, okay, yeah, this makes sense. What can we do here? To make sure that it's still something that we want. It's going to be easy for us to take care of after it's installed. But we don't necessarily have to have a Lamborghini if we could bring that down. And so we went through line item by line item like that, not only with the architects and CG Schmidt, but with my team members as well. And we did that. And so each of those MEPs, there's probably at least 12 to 15 or more pages of scope of work for each of those.
And not to go on and on about this, but this to me speaks to when you have an agency, CG Schmidt and Bray, who do an extensive facility master plan and extensive work for months in our schools, in the attics, in the basements. They know every nook and cranny. So when they can give you an estimate, it's a real estimate. It's not someone looking at your roof for 20 minutes who didn't go in your attic only to find mold in it. They've been in the attic. So like that's speaks to the accuracy that we're looking to have, because these projects, for those of you who have done home construction projects, can very easily get out of hand quickly. So, and when you get to the size of this kind of project, it can get, we'll keep moving. So.
Okay, well, before we get to the next slide, one of the things that, when we changed the orientation of the addition, one of the things that we looked at was the cooling tower and the chiller that are there. And this is what I was talking about before when you said useful life. So if you look at the cooling tower, it was originally put in 1957, and it has a 25-year useful life. So you add 25 to 57, and you're at 1982. That's when the useful life of it was up. I mean, we're still using it. Granted, there's duct tape that's holding it together. We use Flex Seal, but it's still operating and it's still cooling.
We'll add a picture in the next board update.
Yeah, like that. But in talking with 2 or 3 different, HVAC contractors, they all came out and they looked at it and they said, this could go at any time. And if you try to move it or do anything to it, we're afraid it's just going to literally fall apart on you. Some of the refrigerant that's in it, they're phasing out. So we'd have to upgrade the refrigerant. Some of the O-rings that we have, they're specific to that unit. They don't make them anymore. And so that was one of the things we said, okay, we're doing this. We really need to upgrade this as well. Because we don't want to have that, the relocated office and then 2 months later, the HVAC goes out. And so there again, there were some other things that we had to look at and say, okay, we're not going to do this, we're going to do that. One of the things where we could save money on the HVAC is if we put in what they call DX rooftop units, and that save over 200,000. The problem with that is that they're not as reliable. The useful life, isn't as long. But the other is that it's more work for our staff to take care of, year after year after year. And so we sat down and we had long conversations about that, and we felt it was in the best interest of the district overall. And long term, if we went with the cooling tower and the chiller, like we had originally proposed. So, but that's what I was telling so at 25 years, like I said, was in 1982, and we're still using it. So it's not, to me, that speaks to the level of care that we give and have been giving to those, some of those, because I don't think, if I went through building by building, this would not be an outlier in terms of equipment and how old it is, and how we're keeping it together. So I think that may tie into part of what, the question was that you had before, or somebody had asked of you, is that, if you look to most houses, there probably aren't any original furnaces from 1957 in many of the homes. And if they are there, they're not very efficient. They're probably not very safe either.
Right. Yeah. And that's.
And so then on March 3rd, Aaron and I met with representatives of Cobalt Milwaukee just to talk about, what options might be available to us. If for whatever reason the project went longer than what we thought it would be, and we'd have to stay here after the expiration date, because initially built into the contract was a 2-year extension, but we didn't want to be here for 2 years, and there isn't a reason to be here for 2 years. So we had an initial conversation with them on March 3rd, a sit-down meeting, and then we've been having, correspondence since then, and we're going to schedule to meet with them again towards the end of this week, just to kind of finalize, what options may be available to us, and then what the cost would be. We're hopeful that we don't have to do this, but we just wanted to have something in place in case we needed to. And then as you can see by item C here, one of the things we talked about too, and we thought we would just ask them is, what if we just wanted to rent the boardroom, for a year, 2 years, whatever it might be? Is that an option? And what might that look like as well? So we did a lot of, what if,
we're still waiting to hear back from them on that. This option. So,
And then next steps, like I said, talk about the extension of the current 1205 lease if we need to. Develop a plan to temporarily relocate district offices if the lease extension is not viable. Finalize the budget and provide subsequent updates and then plan for the transition. And then that's it.
Any questions? Check on Mr. Becker. Mr. Becker's good. All right, thank you. I know we were along in the process. I just didn't know where, and it's good to know that the plan that we originally passed has changed reasonings and for that, but we're still within our budget. So looking forward as this continues to progress, and I think overall it'll be a good thing for the district. So.
And, I'm sure we're not the only ones that, I know we're not the only districts that Bray and CG Schmidt work with, but every time we talk about something, they go, I know Steve will get the cost to you. Because they know that that's the question that's coming next. And I do have one more thing that I wanted to share with you related to this. And this is a visual representation of what it would look like. Now, the colors, the floor surfaces, the desks, whatever you may see, that's just for context of how big the area is. But this will give you a more visual representation of what it may look like. That's the main entrance. And that would be the enrollment center there. Or I mean that the receptionist area, this would be the enrollment center.
So you can see in the back of the enrollment center is a separate door that would be badged. So
This is entering through the east.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's a receptionist area on the right here.
So we check in,
And then right here, this is a door that they don't show it here, but it would have a Prox card on it. And then when we turn to the left, that door would have a Prox card reader on it as well. And so when we turn here and go through this entryway, this would be into the new addition.
Yep, so that's the
That'd be
leadership
the
and learning
tech classroom.
Mhm.
We go down this hall and then straight ahead, and then down the hall to the left, these would be the leadership and learning workrooms or offices. And then straight ahead where you see those chairs, that would be the workspace, the workroom for them. And one of the things that they said they wanted was a whiteboard that went almost floor to ceiling. So that's why you see that whiteboard there. Then you go back out, and then on the right here, this is the tech classroom, but from the other side.
The windows are intentional.
Yeah.
Issues, can see in, can support, things like that.
And then this is the second conference room, because we have the superintendent's conference room, but then this is the one that's in the new addition. And you can see the way it's set up right now is it could accommodate 12 individuals. But I just want to back up just a little bit to show you, if you look at this right here and you see these windows up on the top, what we're doing is, because we're always going to have some interior offices and hallways in that, what we're trying to do is get as much natural light to bleed through to the interior of the building as we can. So those are up high enough where you're not going to be able to see through them or see out if you're in that conference room, but we're still getting natural light now that'll go out into the interior part of the building.
Erin, what did you say about the windows before? You said they were intentional.
Yeah, the classroom for tech, we wanted to have windows so that way if there's an issue, someone can see in, things like that to have.
Yeah.
If
So-
there's a problem, you hear someone screaming, you can't see, it could just be some, things like that.
So just as we were talking about safety, if an intruder came in and there's all that glass there. I'm just at, how we were talking about the safety of like when we moved and you can see in the glass, and will that glass be tempered? And
Yeah, it'll be safety. It won't be bulletproof or anything like that, but it will be tempered glass.
Okay.
The other is to get into that hallway where the classroom is,
Yeah.
you'd have to have a Prox card. I mean,
I know.
For a couple different places to get.
I
there,
just
so,
saw big windows and I'm
Yeah.
so focused on safety right now that I.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good question. Yeah.
and then you'll see here that looking down that hall, you'll see this will be the copy machine room. And it'll also have the mailboxes for the individual departments, but also for the sites as well. And then this will be the employee break room. Then you go down the hall and there are offices on the right and the left. And again, the furniture and all that is just context to let you know, get an idea of how big the space is. And then if you've been in the building before, as you go down this hall on the left-hand side, you'll see a stairwell. That's an existing stairwell that goes from the upper floor down to where the IT department is, the loading dock, the maintenance, and the print room. So you see it right there. Then we come back down this through the work area there. There'll be more offices when we go back. And then this office straight ahead, that's the superintendent's assistant's office. And then there's communication and some other offices down that hall. Then going back now towards that east, the front of the main entrance, this will be the superintendent's office. And then you can come in off of the hallway, but then you can also go in through here to get into the superintendent's conference room. And then there's a door from the hallway into the conference room as well. And you go back out there and now you're on the interior wall and on the left is the enrollment center. And then you come back and you're at the receptionist area.
Give you kind of a sense, at least of the space. you
Yeah.
know, So it's helpful.
It'll be nice, yeah. Okay, does that raise any additional questions? Thanks for the visual.
That was a great visual.
Yeah, that's really nice to be able to really see the space. I'm just looking at a drawing. Okay, if no additional questions, do we need a break before we move into the last workshop? Or are we okay?
Let's keep going.
Okay, 11.3 school consolidation, part 4. Dr. Lexman, do you have is a piece on this? Yeah, okay, so could we move the audio over, please, Brandon?
Okay, can you hear me? Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks everybody for hanging in here with a lot of facility information, but there's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes and it's just kind of all coming together tonight. So this next step, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Steve and Aaron, was really the big question is, what do we do with the buildings that are no longer going to be schools? Right, and so this has been a long process as well. We have student input that you'll see. We've had community meetings for both Longfellow and Madison, and the team will share the information that we collected there. And ultimately what we're trying to do is drive to a point of some of the properties that will no longer be schools get back on the property tax rolls. We think that's an important part of any kind of future story, especially with, again, aging buildings. We've heard a bunch of that. At some point, there'll be a referendum question again. And so by taking some steps to get some of the properties that we aren't using as schools on the tax rolls is probably good in terms of the storytelling, but also to create with an unused school some flexibility within the organization. You know, there's the survey around specialty schools. Well, how do you start a specialty school? Do you need space to incubate a school program? So some of those kind of things. So those were the big two ideas, like how do we get some property back on the rolls and how do we maintain some things, at least in the short term, that'll provide some flexibility. And so with that, I'll turn it back over now to Steve and Aaron to bring us through that process.
Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Luxman. So with that, we'll jump in here. So the agenda is to just go through some general district-wide facility information, kind of bring it back to the facility, the fact, the group that we had, almost a year and a half ago, the committee, go through some enrollment overviews and goals, timeline background, where have we come from, and then really we're going to go through the same process for the 3 schools that we're consolidating, and then talk about future school consolidation. It's kind of the agenda. So currently our district operates 23 buildings, 11 elementaries. You guys know us, 3 intermediates, 2 comprehensive high schools, and then 1 project-based learning high school. Our buildings, as we've been talking about later, are very old, 78 years old, is the average. And, given that there's a high amount of repairs and needs and aging pieces with that as well. So.
One thing we did, if you look at the bottom of some of these slides, you'll see the red highlighted. Those are links to some of the reports that have been done already. They're on our website, but we thought we'd put the link in here as well.
So this is just an enrollment overview, and Steve mentioned we linked in the Roffer study that was done during the FACT committee. But you can see our enrollments, we've had a decline of enrollment. That's a national state average. It's hit us too. But we're starting to level out, and our current 6th grade class, once they hit the high school, we're going to live in that high 400 range. So the majority is behind us, but just a quick kind of an overview of that. The FACT goal, how many schools should we have? Where should they be? What facilities remain? What are the CIP costs associated with those schools? And kind of really getting into the philosophical of what school space should look like, right? That was part of the FACT committee. And then how do we continue to operate schools in a cost-effective and meaningful way, given the revenue dollars that we have? Were kind of the goals of the committee. So the timeline, this is dates back to January of 2021. So really this just shows kind of the process we've gone through to get all the information related to our schools, the facilities, and working with CG Schmidt and Bray to figure out, which schools have the most CIP needs, which schools don't, which schools are most old, which schools looking at enrollment. So this just shows the process we've gone through. So this is really an extension of that. We're over 2 years from the beginning of that. So timeline and feedback. This kind of gets into the workshops we've had with the board that date, back to July of 21. So the process started in January, and then really we started engaging with the board a few months after that. And this shows you kind of where we've come from as well, just to speak to the process we've gone through, because this is not something we're talking about today out of the blue, right? This has been a continued effort on all of our behalfs. And this just speaks to different supporting materials and documents we've had that have been developed. So as we've all spoken about this before, the facility master plan was developed, and that happened through this process, but we also had an enrollment study done. We've created a CIP list by school, and then capacity analysis. We had a neighborhood schools analysis that was done, and then ultimately the maps that have been redrawn given the school consolidation that will conclude at the end of the year. So prior recommendations from the board, from the FACT committee, were to operate 8 elementaries, 2 intermediates, 1 comprehensive high school, and then 1 project-based learning school, and then identify another elementary, and then a future discussion on the other high school by the end of the year. And then again, the linked presentation to that exact discussion that I'm referencing. Okay, so that's kind of the background to get us up to speed here where we are today. So throughout the year, we've been working as we've been, keeping the board apprised of the school consolidation process that the executive team has been working through and with staff. And so now, as Dr. Luxon referenced, the discussion today is around like, where are we at with the buildings and kind of having that extension just conversation. So we'll start with Lane, given that the board has made a recommendation already around Lane. We'll kind of go through the process and talk about what we're thinking at this point. So a little overview of Lane, picture the building. This slide's interesting to me because it shows the evolution of the building. And so you can kind of see here in each color, the oldest part of Lane, all the way up to the newest part of Lane. So, the pink is the new gymnasium and the office and the classrooms, and the oldest part of Lane is from 1926. It's actually the brown section right off the old cafeteria and classroom addition. So the building itself has had a number of projects and renovations and additions done to it, but it does speak to some of the age and areas that where you see additional costs coming from, it's a good, not always information everyone has. So I thought it was an interesting slide, I guess, to look at. So Lane, what's the remaining question? The remaining question here is to determine if the remaining property unused by the community recreation should be sold, repurposed, or leased. Kind of a question that, to be honest, is probably on hold until the board formally sees the plans that CG Schmidt with Bray and the community recreation department has around, here's the proposal about what the future recreation center would look like at the Lane site. And then making a determination of if the remaining parcel of the property is something that the board at that point wants to, sell or repurpose or whatever the options there may be. But for some background, we purchased Lane in 13 for just under 2 million, about 1.895 million. Obviously had some benefits to us at the time, and the opinion value at this point we've received is the property appraisal list price would be around 3 million with probably a sale price of around 2.5. So certainly not a bad financial decision in terms of just monetary amounts of what it's worth, but really at this point, to get a parcel value, you need to know where you draw the line. And so then at that point, once we kind of get those plans to you that Shelley will be working on with her committee, our steps would be to have it appraised again. What's this portion worth? And then it's like, well, what's it worth with the existing structure? What's it worth without it? And then if we take that structure down, what it costs to take it down.
Right.
And then do you add that on top of the parcel appraisal? Right. So there's some layers to that, but that's kind of where we're at. And that's why you don't see an appraisal on a parcel, because where's the line? That's just the background there. So this is just in general, what will likely happen is, the demolition will take place of everything. Essentially, I always get my directions messed up. That's north,
South.
Thank you. Of the newest portion of Lane. And so, that's where Shelley's team will likely begin in August to start working through those steps. And so I know the first question she's going to engage with CG Schmidt and Bray on is going to be, so if we unattach the new portion from the old portion and then have to build a structure to close it up on both sides, is it more expensive to do that? Or is it cheaper just to demolish the whole thing? And I'm guessing that they're going to say it's cheaper just to demolish everything that you don't want. But we're going to find out. So more to come on that, but that's kind of the thinking here. So our recommendation at this point is, to redevelop the parcel unused by the community rec center Lane to be sold with an intent that it goes back on the property tax rolls. Next steps would be we'd get the formalized plans from the community recreation site to the board to have those be approved, determine parcel details, get an appraisal done, and then if the recommendation was approved by the board, we'd look to draft an RFP in conjunction with the city of West Dallas. I think that's a bigger discussion there. It's around Greenfield, Highway hundreds there. I think there might be some interest there from the private sector to maybe look at purchasing some properties there to put whatever they want. So that's Lane.
And we still have to get that rezoned with the city as well.
Correct. Yeah.
The rec center.
Yep. All right, same kind of process with Madison. So you kind of seen the steps we've taken with Lane. So it'll be the same thing. So Madison, the building details here, built in 1961, just over 5 acres, and building evolution. So not as colorful as Lane. So the building was built in the 1961, and really nothing at this point. No additions have been done to it. So it's one of our newer buildings, under 40,000 square feet. So really the goal here is to determine if Madison should be sold, leased, repurposed, et cetera, right? That's kind of the question. So here's the steps of, options. Option A, list the property for sale, look at kind of the highest bidders and the other considerations as we talked about with Lane, who's looking to buy it, what's their goals, how they line up with our goals, things like that. Option B, consider pre-listing suitors. So, we could lease it, we could rent it out, we could use it for other areas. Option C, kind of as Dr. Lexman referenced, adaptive reuse of the school at a future date. What do those look like? Well, that could be, a potential charter school. We could run an innovation school, a specialty school. Could look at potentially leasing a daycare center there. You could potentially look at, if you're going to redevelop it, in a sale, maybe that becomes housing. This is all inclusive of any idea, not just like if we kept it, right? So just, you know, the possibilities become endless, right? A bit. So it's kind of some options. You know, benefit of the property, it's relatively in good condition. It's one of our newer buildings. It's a pretty straightforward design, adequate parking, you know, things like that. There's some outdoor space. So kind of the recommendation we had in terms of, I'm sorry, the appraisal we got from that was around a 1.7 list price and probably a sale price of 1.5 million. It's kind of an idea of what it would cost, right? So then this gets into the community meeting. So we had a community meeting where where community members are able to come and engage around kind of what we're looking to do, this question, right? What would they like to see it become? What would they think they would not like it to see it become? We had some things that you might imagine, but purpose is to explore kind of creatively and financially viable options to reuse Madison after the school closes and kind of discuss with small groups and get their feedback around like what that might look like, and then bring those ideas back here today, right? That's kind of the goal. So we started kind of with this idea of, you know, here's to get people's minds thinking. We had, you know, some different links that people could explore at these meetings. And we brought them up, like, what if it was a community center? What would that look like? Here's an examples around the country of a couple different examples of community centers. What if it was housing? What, you know, could it be mixed development that's the next option? Or would it be redeveloped into townhouses or things like that to give people a sense of what it could be? A lot of schools become apartments, right? Things like that. So, and then there's some other kind of more fun ideas that school districts have done and selling it to become arts and entertainment, but each community is different in what they want and what they need, right? So just some options. And then what we did is we, you know, Dr. Lexman gave a kind of brief presentation about these ideas and then let people kind of go to each station to kind of discuss it with other community members and create these lists of what they don't want it to see. Well, the things you could imagine they don't want it to see are, you know, liquor stores, strip clubs, you know, CBD, alcohol, just things like that. That was not the unilaterally things we saw across all community sessions, right? Things that people saw they wanted green space. One of the questions that came up, what I thought was interesting from a philosophical perspective is, what is something all communities should have, right? You know, a park, they should have sidewalks, they should have a school that's considered neighborhood, right? They should have maybe a place you can get a cup of coffee, right? I mean, there's things that came up. It was discussions. It was interesting. But benefits, you could see here, people really felt like the benefits there, you know, were that they wanted to see something that benefits the whole community, right? Helps grow the community, multi-use space. We saw people talking a lot really positively in that community about the Lane Recreation Center. We had a lot of positive feedback from there. Anything else I'm missing with that, Steve? Oh yeah. And then the other two areas, people really didn't feel like housing was a good option for Madison at that community session. The feedback we got was they didn't really see that being a part of the community there. And there seemed to be a lot of support at the community session around like the techs and trades and keeping the green space in a place where the community can kind of be involved with that. So that seemed to be a lot of the feedback we got.
There's just a link at the bottom of the page again, where you could see more detail of what we have here. We just tried to summarize what, the high points and the priorities.
Mm-hmm. So in summary, we kind of had a couple different themes, not kind of in order what we thought in general from the community feedback, the people that were there that gave the feedback, we thought in order of where the conversation went and filling the charts out, the grids in order. People felt like a reuse of the building in terms of keeping it a school of some fashion, whether that's a full-blown school or it's more of a satellite where schools can use that site to do more innovative work. That seemed to have the most support. The community session number 2 was more of this arts idea, this idea around what does every community should have. And so it's kind of where that took some traction. And then last was housing, mixed development. They really didn't see that. They felt like if it was going to be housing, it needed to be housing. They didn't feel like a shop at the bottom of an apartment. People didn't really like that idea there. Just what they thought. So based on that, based on the feedback, our recommendation at this point would be to put a hold on Madison really, and to keep having discussions around what that could be. And some options. There are some logistical challenges. I don't want to get too deep into this, but like currently Sodexo operates out of Madison, right? With us moving out of here, And it's beyond just like Sodexo's there. You know, Sodexo uses Madison, they have the field house there, but they also have the bay that they can bring equipment in, right? So like, where else could they go? Well, Central's huge. They could go Central. Well, they need to be able to get to the third floor of Central with equipment. So it's like practically, that would be tough for them to do that. Like, I'm sure we could find a space, but it's very convenient for them to use currently. So there's some other logistical things here, but based on that, that's kind of where our recommendation sits at this point. So.
And we have that survey that we had sent out, right, about the interest in the community first specialty school and where that falls. And I know that was, we're extending the comment, or are we going back to that?
We can talk about it at our next meeting.
Okay.
But it just as I live a half a block from Madison, so I 100% just knowing my neighborhood and having lived there for as long as I have. I agree with all of it. I mean, this is spot on as to I think what our neighborhood wants or what we would desire. So we wouldn't, I think maintaining or keeping it, holding on to it and kind of doing further investigation as to what we want to do with it. I just think it's a good space. And it's got options, you know, especially with, even though the school building itself is small, we've got a lot of acreage there and stuff. So I was happy to see this because I'd rather have us, even if we end up eventually selling Madison, just kind of taking this slowly and figuring out what exactly we wanted to do or what we want it to be.
It's good to see that that's consistent with what you thought in your.
I mean, there's things that I've heard neighbors say and people that have talked to me, it just really aligns well with just that community. I totally knew that nobody was going to want apartments in there.
Yeah.
Just because it is a single family home community mostly. I mean, we have some duplexes, but for the most part, it's very single family home and just, you know, so yeah. I'm glad to see that came out.
So lastly, Longfellow. So just some details. You can see the age of the building is much older than Madison, and the size is about the same. But it's that. So the building evolution, kind of similar to Lane, but a little more cut and dry. So the oldest part of the building built in 1927 in brown, and then the gymnasium was an addition in the 1950s, and then the final addition, kind of back towards the playground area, was built in 2000. So the same goal as Madison, right? What do we do with it? Sell, repurpose, lease, etc. So some options for property sale, you know, we kind of have here same kind of process, right? We also included some short-term plans because when we met with the city, some of their feedback was, hey, even if you list it for sale, this might sit for a few years. Interest rates are pretty high. This is a pretty big project. We're working with the city on if there's some, you know, historic tax credits, given the age of the building, those take some time to get approved. That might be more of a, I guess, a reason why someone would want to look at developing it, because they can make more money essentially by doing that. So we have some short-term plans if like that were to be the recommendation. So we could look at rental. We have the community-based transition program, which is kind of growing. We have more students that need, so finding a space for them, that might be an option short-term. And then also, you know, Dr. Lexman's talked about a community food pantry, and that might be an option that they could run that and provide a service to the community as an option. And then really the other two options are consistent with Madison as well, and some of the options for discussion. So benefits, you know, the property has a lot of original, you know, adequate parking. There's not a ton of things to go through, but it's a large space. But you know, there's no elevator. It lacks some of the ADA accessibility. And then besides the main office, there's air conditioning issues. And then the resale, given some of the I guess CIP needs, is less than Madison, but the appraisal came out to be just over $1 million that we could sell it for, we thought. So community meeting, same goals for the purpose, same kind of reuse idea. Similar presentation was developed and given at Longfellow as at Madison. And what we found was different than what we found at Madison. So the community session, many people felt like, you know, having mixed use, small business, commercial was maybe more of an attractive feature in that neighborhood as opposed to the Madison neighborhood. Similar things they don't want to see. They didn't want to see a complete tear down. They didn't want to see fast food. They didn't want to see large retailer bars and restaurant bars. And then for community center, the only negative there was they didn't want people that Didn't want that to become a place where people could just hang out. You know, the loitering thing came up with it. It was interesting. Housing, they didn't want to see 1 to 2 bedroom apartments. They thought more of kind of this, you know, luxury 2.5 bedroom kind of thing. But with mixed use, that seemed to have the most support. You know, coffee shops, things people can use. Green space was a big discussion. Is there a way to do that and have the green space, the community play, like for kids to play, things like that? That's highly used from. That seemed to be something people were talking a lot about. So that was good. And then consistent with Madison, people didn't want to see bars and resale shops, CBD, things like that. And at the bottom, there's a link to that too. So kind of, you know, the feedback we got were, you know, looking at selling the building for a private redevelopment for one of these reasons seemed to have some support. So mixed use, community center seemed to be an option from people. That was something they considered. But really our recommendation based on that would be for the board to consider having that go out to bid to be sold. It seemed to be kind of the thing to get back on the tax rolls, really. So yeah. We'll keep moving. So then future school consolidation. So I just made a reference here. So early June last year, the board took formal action to revisit FACT, right? Which would include continued discussion around a 3rd elementary and then the consolidation of 2 comprehensive high schools. So my strong recommendation is that the board can pause that discussion for a future date. I think there's a few reasons, mainly. One, Dr. Robinson's transition. I feel like having him become apprised of kind of where we're at with this and is something that I think I would consider. Just my recommendation. Number 2, I think we're still amidst the school consolidation process of closing 3 schools. I feel like it's gone, in my opinion, it's gone very well in working with staff and getting those systems in place. There's going to be road bumps. We've got new bus routes, kids going to new schools. We're going to have to kind of work through that. From a financial health and stability perspective, I feel like the district, we're in really good shape. I feel like you guys, that's not new news to you. So it's not like we'd be closing a school due to a financial crisis. So, you know, waiting a year or whatever that may look like for you is not something we have to do. And then really the high school, our current enrollment, we couldn't do that right now anyway. You know, until the 6th grade class hits the sophomore, junior year, it's not from an enrollment perspective viable. So there is time. There's not a ton of time, but there's time for that decision to get put on hold. Whether that's a year, 6 months, 2 years, something like that. So that's currently my recommendation. You know, so I guess this is the summary of the 4 recommendations. So really for Lane, it's to kind of put a hold and then look at what that parcel might look like to be appraised and then put out to bid. Madison is really to retain in the school district this time until a future date. And then Longfellow, it's to do the same process as with Lane. And for future school consolidation, it's to just put a hold on it at this point. A lot of information really quick, but I know it's late, so I wanted to get through it and yeah.
Questions?
How long would, hands up.
Ms. Kaiser.
How long would you recommend another future consolidation? Because it's on the docket for by end of June, we discussed the high schools, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So where are we at with that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you say you recommend that, you know, we made action last year that we would table it to June.
Yeah, my recommendation would be for a minimum a year, and you could even go 2, because the 6th grade class currently, you know, will be in 7th grade, and it's not viable until they're at least sophomores. That would be tight. Juniors is practical. You could actually do it when in 5 years.
Okay.
So, you know, just depends on kind of what other things are going on at the time, you know, into other agenda items and things like that. But at minimum a year, you know,
Gotcha.
That's where I'd be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Regarding the consolidation discussion, we would have to take formal action to move that date for both the elementary and the high schools. So we were discussing the possible making a decision about closing the additional elementary and the high schools. So that would be something that would have to be added to any action item that we'd be having for the building moving forward. As part of that discussion, though, I know we have time. Not a lot of times you said, but I think that what really we need to do is get some really good community input on what the community wants to see, because I think that will help guide the board in determining what will eventually happen. If the community says we want 2 high schools in our community long term, that tells the board to say, okay, well, what would it take to do that? And then present those opportunities to the community to say, you told us you wanted this, it's going to require these steps in order to accomplish that. Do you still now want that? Because obviously what I'm referring to is there will require a referendum. Probably 2, an operational to be able for the staff to fund 2 high schools, and one for facilities to be able to make both high schools up to snuff for a long term of our district. And that's not going to be a small dollar amount, but I have heard from numerous different community members that the reason that they didn't support is because they wanted 2 high schools. And so I want to get like a survey, whatever, something that says, here's the options. What is the community saying that they want? And then what would the cost be for that to happen? Because yes, you're talking about consolidating without doing anything, which if we don't get financial support, will have to happen eventually, because it just will not be financially viable to continue operating 2 high schools. Not to mention the cost, the CIP costs alone, but let alone just being able to functionally staff them is something that I think, I don't know if it's lost or just not comprehended for the community. And we need to communicate that well so that they can understand that. But I really think the discussion about are we consolidating these high schools needs to go to the community, and they need to say, this is what we want to see as a whole. And then we will support the costs to do that. That's what we need to see. And if the answer to that is yes, we want to, but no, we won't support the costs, then that tells us which direction we have to go.
Absolutely. And I think the challenge is when you talk about school consolidation from a general perspective, it's harder to actually, when you boil it down to the details, because Central and Hale, that's a different discussion than another elementary, right? There's a lot more logistical challenges, like we talked about Wilson last year, and 362 kids, and where are they all going to go? You're going to redraw every map for the elementaries to make that happen. Like that's a difficult thing to work through. If that, you know what I mean? That's different than the high. So it's like each of them by themselves are difficult. They're not like as easy as just, you know what I mean? So, but I agree. That's good feedback. So,
I mean, that's my personal opinion, but I just really think that before our question is asked regarding, operationally or a facilities referendum, that I really want to hear what the community wants with those options that are out there and see what they say. And then based off of that, make plans. And then we have that time to do that. We have the time to do the survey, get the feedback, focus groups, all that sort of stuff. If we're looking at current 6th graders being sophomores as the kind of the point that we want to have a decision by. But again, we would have to take some formal action on that based on what we had done last year. So we can work that into when will we be asked to take formal action on these pieces here?
That's a good question. I don't know. Dr. Luxman, do you have any thoughts on when that might come?
Yes. So can you hear me? No. No. So the goal was to have the board take action and give us some direction during the month of April. So we can bring that back either the first meeting, maybe we bring all of this back the second regular meeting of April, and include how the board would like to reconsider any future consolidations. Because I think it could be interesting to really reach out and gather information so that whatever direction is really well informed, but we can work that in.
For the recommendations forward, is there any questions, comments, concerns about those for each of the 3 buildings? Okay, with it. Mr. Becker, his camera's off, so I'm presuming he's okay. Are you okay? You're all right? Okay, he's back on. All right. Well, if we have no questions, thank you so much. Appreciate this. It was a lot. Board, thank you for your attention. We have A few more things that we need to do in closed session, but at this point, we'll close out this workshop. And we will take a 5-minute recess so we can get everything torn down so we can go into close. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for all your work.
Thank you so
Thank you very much. Recess. All right, we're good. So I need a motion and a second to convene into executive session.
Can someone respond to Joe? He's asking if we can get into closed.
Door's still open.
Yeah, right.
No, yeah, because we have to move into closed session.
Oh,
Let's just do the
okay.
motion and second first, and we'll tell Joe he's not going to be in closed.
Do we know who that is?
Who?
Oh, I just got a text from somebody.
It's
Well,
Joe.
no, it's not the 806 number.
I didn't get text.
We're doing this now we're live, so let's just.
Oh, I take
motion.
that back. It is 806 or 860.
I need a motion and a second to convene an executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.5, parent 1, parent F, for the purpose of considering multiple student disciplinary expulsion orders, which if discussed in public, would be likely to have substantial effect upon the reputation of the students involved.
So move.
Second.
Please do the roll, Suzette.
Mrs. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Burns,
Yes.
Mr. Becker is excused, Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee. Yes. Ms. Deal.
Yes.
Mr. Sickich,
Yowza.
President Lee.
Yes. All right. So Joe, we're leaving the Zoom. We don't have a Zoom for closed session, so you're off the hook. So have a good rest of your evening. And we're gonna take care of this business and get on with our evenings ourselves. All right. So thank you very much. So I'm gonna leave the Zoom right now. Have a wonderful rest of your time.